Welcome to the August 15th, 2024 Northampton City Council meeting. I'm Alex Jarrett, and as City Council President, I'll be presiding this evening, along with Vice President Rachel Maori. This meeting and all participating on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. The meeting can also be watched on Comcast Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media's YouTube channel. I now call the City Council to order. Could you take the roll, please, Laura?
Sure. Councillor Dobbs.
Here.
Councillor Elkins.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Clemmer.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Moulton.
Here.
Councillor Perry.
Here.
And Councillor Rothenberg.
Here.
Council President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight's highlights include the fiscal year 2024 fourth quarter, which is also the end of year financial report presentation, an order to appropriate money for a replacement of the Leeds Elementary School boiler, an order and two ordinances related to stop signs and parking restrictions, and discussion of a request from the school committee to form a 4 to 6 person collaborative work group between the school committee and the city council to discuss and make recommendations for actions to address future budget shortfalls. Next is public comment. If you wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. And the raise hand feature is in the bottom menu bar. If you are calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. If you're having trouble raising your virtual hand, you can turn on your video and physically raise your hand. If you want to submit a written public comment, please email it to citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. It will be sent to all councilors and will be part of the public record. Before you begin, please state your name and your city or town for the public record. And to ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to speak, the council limits comments to a maximum of 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, I or a Councilor Maori will ask you to please finish your sentence. According to council rules, we don't respond during public comment. It is your time to speak. Our rules also state that councilors and members of the public shall conduct themselves with civility and respect at all times. And your protected speech is a constitutional right, and it's one that we ask you to wield with consideration and respect for all, and with recognition that the public space that grants you that freedom is shared equally by everyone. You can speak on any topic. It doesn't need to be an item on the agenda, and all comments are to be directed to the council. So we'll start. The first person with their hand raised is Nan. Nan, your name and city or town, please.
Nancy Smith, Chapel Street. If you were a hospital administrator dealing with rising costs, would you consider cutting back on the antibiotics and blood supplies patients need? That would be catastrophic and ridiculous. Student-facing teachers, aides, and interventionists are the lifeblood of our schools. We know the money is there, and we know it won't require an override to keep a young teacher who is already beloved for motivating and inspiring students, or the reading and math interventionists who support our struggling students. Their salaries won't break the bank. When we lose those interventionists, the only way their students can get the help they need is to move to an IEP, an arduous process that will end up costing the city far more money. It makes no sense, and quite honestly is nothing but cruel at this point. For the love of God, take the $300,000 being requested out of the existing $800,000 of school-generated Medicaid reimbursement money you tied up in a special education reserve fund and give it to the schools now. This is an emergency. If you need a trophy project, how about becoming one of the best public school districts in the state? Great goal, and it won't require an override, just sound, responsible management of all of our tax dollars, Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nan. Next is Andrea Bertini. Your name and city or town, please.
Andrea Bertini, and I'm from Florence. I'm the parent who has been posting the iReady scores. The iReady scores that indicate we have hundreds of kids who can't read or write in our community, specifically at the middle school. The numbers are absolutely jaw-dropping. I've sent you all this data. A couple of you responded, but most of you didn't. After all the parents, educators, elected leaders who have stood here during public comment for months, begging, crying, and pleading for their kids, for all the kids and all the schools, not just lobbying for one school like Stan, Gwen, Holly, Marissa, and Karen, but those speaking, advocating, who are fighting for all the schools. I've come to realize something really disheartening and demoralizing. It doesn't matter what any of the school assessments say or how bad they are regarding student performance and abilities. It doesn't matter how many teachers and principals have resigned and fled this district. It doesn't matter how many superintendents and special ed directors we go through. It doesn't matter how many parents and kids school choice out of the community. It doesn't matter how many kids at the high school don't get electives or are crammed unsafely into classrooms because there are too many kids. It doesn't matter how many kids don't pass the MCAS. It doesn't matter how many kids can't read or write or do math at grade level who lack the support and intervention at the middle school. One of the goals in the strategic plan is to increase performance on ELA and math for your most marginalized students. And your response was to cut teachers and paras, almost all of the reading and math interventionists district-wide. You took away almost all of the limited support they had, which by all measurements wasn't enough to begin with. What I realized living in Northampton is this is a town that talks a lot about equity, inclusion, social justice, but doesn't have enough elected officials who care about those values. Actions speak louder than words. You've had the opportunity to help the schools to invest in the future of this community, and you have turned your backs not just in this budget cycle, but in years and years of budget cycles. I regret my votes. I actually had one of your signs on my lawn. I thought you were people who valued our schools and kids who attend them. It's clear by your action that is just not the case. And lastly, I want to extend my gratitude to the Fab Five, Quaverly, Rachel, Jeremy, and Emily, and Michael, who despite the ire of the popular kids are committed and trying to help. You brought light in the face of great upset and sadness. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Shelley Berkowitz. Shelley, your name and city or town, please.
Northampton, Massachusetts. I moved to Northampton 29 years ago with my husband and 2 young children. Word of mouth touted Northampton as progressive, with tolerance, kindness, excellent public schools, the essential values of social equity and diversity, the prime ingredients of a progressive town. All seemed well. My kids went to Jackson Street, Northampton High. There were many locally owned shops, restaurants, affordable housing, funky movie houses, many music venues. I remained blithely ignorant of city politics. 10 years ago, I was proud to see that the city council, including our current mayor, voted to support underpaid mental health workers on strike for a living wage, reassuring me that Northampton was a progressive town. Fast forward 1 to 2 years ago, many signs that all is not well in Paradise City. Boarded up storefronts, Gazette articles warning of severe budget cuts, threatening to eliminate essential positions and student services in our schools. The pizza factory closed due to private equity, rising residential and water taxes, the looming threat of an override for the schools announced by the mayor, 2 huge cash-draining city projects, Picture Main Street and the Resilience Hub emerged, adding to the public's confusion over the city funding. 90% of school employees cast a no confidence vote against our school superintendent for her lack of responsiveness and advocacy. The city I knew and loved had changed. Time for a crash course in civics. I read, talked to officials, attended city council and school board meetings. A democratic citywide movement of the people emerged with signs all over. Save our schools, fund our schools, the pleas of the people to reverse the harms being perpetrated on our children. The mayor canceled the 4-hour schools override, reportedly due to unexpected millions of added dollars, but she still would not levelly fund the budget. This lack of transparency, respect for citizens, and poor judgment in decision-making by the city government is shown. While federal and state politics may play some role, the blame for poor, I'll finish my sentence, but poor local outcomes rest squarely on the city's choice of priorities. Mayor, we can do better. Fix the school budget. You still can. All of us are watching. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Stein.
Hi, I'm Michael Stein from Northampton. The recent request and approval by this body to remove the planned override due to unexpected revenues has made me think a lot about what the word unexpected means. Typically, it means that something was not regarded as likely to happen. That's what makes the justification for the recent removal of the ballot question so peculiar. The mayor asked the council to vote to put a $3 million override on the ballot on June 20th, just 10 days short of the end of the fiscal year. At that point, the administration should have had a good sense of what their revenues were for the year. And in fact, the Q3 reports paint a picture that does not support the unexpected claims justifying the removal of the ballot measure. The FY24 Q3 report listed over $2.3 million in year-to-date motor vehicle excise tax. The original projection was $2.8 million, and it had been revised down to roughly $2.6 mid-year, despite having back-to-back prior years with roughly $2.9 million in motor vehicle excise revenue. The FY24 Q3 report also listed nearly $1.7 million in year-to-date interest on investments. The original projection was $165,002, despite the fact that more than $1 million was generated in interest in FY23 on a projection of $80,000. I pointed out these figures when I begged you all not to gut the schools. Given that these figures were known and it was entirely possible to both check the year-to-date revenue on all categories or use simple math to figure out how much additional interest was going to be received in Q4, the administration says they were surprised and as a result no longer need an override. This just is incredible. I do think something unexpected happened. I think the mayor unexpectedly realized that an override on the heels of a large property assessment increase, and in the context of defunding the schools, with roughly 35 positions eliminated in the past 2 years, meant that it was a terrible time to ask voters to pay more money for less services. She also likely realized that she had entirely alienated all of the community members she would need to canvass and support an override campaign. I hope, much like the word deficit, this administration can learn to use the word unexpected more truthfully, or just be honest.
Thank you. Next is Karen Hidalgo. Your name and city or town, please. Karen, are you able to unmute? Would anyone else like to speak? And then we can circle back to Karen. Just give another minute. Okay, I'm not able to reach Karen, and I don't see anyone else who would like to speak. So last call for that. And Karen, you can send in your by email as well, citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. Okay, public comment is now closed. That brings us next to announcements from councilors and the mayor.
Oh, I think it's working.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I tried like
no,
6 times and it wouldn't work until now.
Sure, yeah. No, we can go back to
Karen,
public comment.
thanks.
We
Karen
haven't moved
Hidalgo.
on. So go ahead, Karen. You have 2 minutes.
Ward 1, Northampton. I'm a school counselor at NHS and a parent of 2 students in the district. First, I need to say again that NHS is understaffed relative to the other schools in the district and other area high schools. This is not mitigated completely or even much by dual enrollment, Smith College, internships, or a slight decline in enrollment. We've needed multiple teachers for the last 5 to 10 years. Requests go unmet in Spanish, life sciences, technology, and art every year. My second topic is the language that has been used to describe school budget advocates. We've been called a mob, divisive, and a small group. We've been treated as other and less than, all because we want our schools to be fully funded. I don't always agree with everything that is said by those who speak for fully funding the schools, but I will continue to stand with this group that understands the importance of public education and is willing to fight for it. Back to the budget. The mayor has said repeatedly that the schools have the biggest portion of the city's budget pie. This is true for every town and city I know of in Massachusetts. In other words, it means nothing. I do have questions about how the total is calculated. From Councilor Moulton's newsletter, I understand that the NPS budget is just over $40 million. Smith Voc is listed at over $11 million. I would estimate we have no more than 120 Northampton residents at Smith Voc, so that would mean we're spending $94,296 per student. Presumably, the $11 million figure includes the non-Northampton residents whose sending towns pay tuition. I find it disingenuous to count in our budget a figure that does not account for reimbursement from sending towns. Last thing, our students at NHS, like young people around the country, have been suffering from the effects of a mental health pandemic that predates the COVID-19 pandemic. The city should have anticipated the ending of ESSER's funds and made arrangements to keep supporting our students who are still experiencing academic and social emotional losses from the pandemic. They will continue to need additional support for several more years at least. As a city, we should be figuring out how to support our students at this time rather than maintaining bank account balances among the highest in the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing
Thought there was
none.
a hand.
Oh, there's a hand in a video, or I don't see a hand on the participant
I
list.
think it went down again.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Paula, your name and city or town, please.
I just want to say my hand was up to let you know that Karen was trying to get into the thing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, let's move on to announcements from counselors and the mayor. Counselor Perry.
Yes. So as the summer winds down, there are a few more outdoor events that are happening in the city. One is coming up soon. On August 20th is the 35th year of performance, is what they call it now. And the theme is planes, trains, and automobiles. Not only do you get to see a bunch of local bands perform some great songs, but you also help to contribute to arts programs at the Northampton Public Schools, as well as the PTOs. You can pick up tickets at State Street, Coops Corner, or let me see what the link is. Pardon me. You can go to www.freshtix.com/events/performance to buy tickets, and that's at Look Park, so please support that. And speaking of some more things, that we also have Salsa in the Park happening. We've got 3 more of those. The next one is August 27th with DJ Bongo Head. So go out, learn some dance moves, and be a part of this awesome community that happens right here in downtown Northampton.
Thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank Richard Cooper for the fantastic sign that he has placed up in Florence area on Gabby Thomas. Well written, and she deserves claps from everybody in Northampton, Florence, and Leeds with the amount of gold medals that she has won. So thank you, Richard Cooper and your family, for the great signs on Gabby Thomas.
Thank you. Mayor Shara.
Evening, everyone. I would like to take a moment and recognize Northampton resident Phil Corman, who recently announced that after 16 years as executive director of CISA, Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture, that he is moving on from that organization. And I just want to recognize him and wish him well on whatever he's going to do next. Phil has been a really tireless, but I would say also a joyful advocate for local food and agriculture and workers and farms. And Northampton and the region is, I should be very grateful for all the work that he's put in these 16 years leading CISA. And we wish him all the best and want to recognize that work. And I have a certificate that we will be sending him. He couldn't be here this evening, but he knows that we are thanking him.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councilor Labarge.
No,
Is
I'm
your
sorry.
hand still up from earlier? Okay. Any other councilors have announcements? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to presentations. So the fiscal year 2024 fourth quarter financial report, a presentation by Finance Director Charlene Nardi. And I did want to note before we go into that, there has been some confusion in past meetings about who has the floor when we're in dialogue between councilors and city staff at past meetings. So wanted to explain my thinking. So when a councilor asks a question of city staff, I see this as beginning a conversation on the topic of the question. So as long as folks aren't interrupting each other, both parties may speak without being recognized by me. But if there are interruptions, I'll step in and ask each party to be recognized before speaking. Director Nardi, welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. As Council President Jarrett said, this is the fourth quarter report and the last report for FY 2024. As everybody is aware, the budget ends, the budget season ends on June 30th. And then throughout the summer, the city goes through a process of closing the budget. I just want to reiterate things we talked about quickly about these numbers and what I was looking at. As I was looking at these numbers, I want to be clear that the numbers we were looking at doesn't change what we've already solidified as the FY 2025 budget, or what can be rolled in for reoccurring for the $1.98 million that the city is using in reserves to support the school budget. What it did indicate to me was that we could probably adjust the revenues for FY 26 based on what I was seeing and what I'll present tonight for FY 2024, which would allow us to hold off on the override. Where we canceled the override because it was a specific date, so cancel is the word, we are delaying that override. There will need to be an override to roll in that $1.9 million we're using. So again, thank you for tonight. I'd just like to go through and give you the full report. And if I may share my screen.
You should have permission.
Okay. Let me see if I can get where it is. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, is it large enough for everyone? All right, hearing no complaints, here we go. So the real estate and personal property taxes came in at 98 and 96%. These are in line with past years. This is right here. As you can see, there is a little bit left. The collector will continue to try to collect those taxes. And as you are aware, there is a very structured process in which the treasurer collector goes through to collect those unpaid taxes. Her office does work directly with homeowners. The next one, motor vehicle. So motor vehicle excise, as mentioned, it was $3.4 million. This revenue came in over budget by $835,000, and this is $443,000 increased over the last year, FY 2023. The year before that, it only increased $8,900 from the previous year, FY 23 over 22. This budget projection was raised to $3 million for FY 2025. to cover the increases in the assessments in the cherry sheet. So I reported on August 5th that it was actually 2.9, but because the cherry sheet assessments were larger too, I needed to adjust that. So that amount, $3 million, is just 100,000 under the 3-year average of fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. So as we look at the hotel motel, the budget was 780,000. It came in at $1,077,700, which exceeded the budget estimates by 38%. It is higher than any of the prior years. And seeing this trend begin in FY 2023 when the local revenues really rebounded, this has been pushed higher. It was budgeted at 875 for FY 25, which is about 89,000 less than the 3-year average of 963,000, which includes the FY 24 new revenue totals. So then if we go to the meals, $791,412. This exceeded our budget projections of $650,000 by $141,412, or 21.8%. This is above the revenue collected in FY 23. But again, I want to clarify that is only an increase of 1.5% over the prior year. So in FY 25, this was estimated at $725,000, which is just under by about 30,000, the 3-year average. As I showed on August 5th, this line is not always increasing. And I just want to note that there was a recent Boston Globe article recently that spoke of the slowing of meals purchases, people going out and dining, and that it was an indicator that things are changing the economy. So for me, that is a cautionary tale that we just want to keep an eye on. Marijuana revenue, or the cannabis. So that is 744,000 was the revised estimate. It came in at $944,812. That is an increase of $98,660 over last year's total revenue. That's an 11% increase. This is the first year we've seen an increase over prior years since FY 2020. When setting the FY 25 estimates, this was again set lower because I didn't have this data, and most of this collection, as I talked about on August 5th, came in the 4th quarter to make it look significantly different. So we will continue to look at this to see if that can be adjusted for FY 2026. The bottom half of this section are the pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes. These amounts are estimated during the budget season. So for the FY 2024 budget, that would mean in the spring of 2023, they were set. And then the amounts are actually calculated based on the updated assessed values of the property and the tax rate, which all happens in the fall. They are then invoiced in December, and that's why you will see a little bit of a difference in some of these amounts is because of timing. And all the amounts are spelled out and calculated based on agreements that the city has with the entities. So, whoops, moving to the bottom of page 1. We're looking at parking revenues. That's starting here. As you can see in this corner, you'll see zeros and 100%. You'll see that is true for all of these. And the reason for that is because parking revenues must be exactly what we budgeted to cover expenses. For any of the counts that come in under budget, funds are taken from the parking receipts reserved account to make the budget revenue whole, or 100%. If a line comes in above the budget projections, which it did happen in this case, the excess revenue is put back into the parking receipts reserved account. This year in FY 2024, we came in over $606,000, which went back into the receipts reserved account, and that will support the parking system, capital projects related to the parking system, and future year budgets. 66% of that amount, that $606,000, came from mobile app revenue. The amount budgeted the amount that I budget every year is based on the indirects calculation. So we take a calculation of the cost of the parking system operations, which includes personnel, operating and maintenance costs, and then we use that number to put in the budget. So for an FY 2021, the budget estimate was $1.21 million. In FY25, I redid the calculations and it came out to $1.28 million in direct costs. So that's how we use that number. We are still below the levels in parking revenue receipts we were seeing prior to the pandemic by about $230,000, which was parking revenues were at their highest in FY 2019. Ambulance services, that's right here. Continues to be a significant source of revenue, bringing in $3.4 million, almost 3.5, which is 24.9% above the budgeted amount. However, this is only, again, and I tried to show this in the August 5th meeting with those graphs that kind of went up and down. This is only 4.5% higher than FY 2023. And that's a smaller percent increase than over the 3 prior years where it bounced from year to year. It went up 7.5%. And then in 21 to 22, it increased by 15%. And then FY 22 to 23, it was 18%. Again, this is only a 4.5% jump over last year. Still significant money. So this line was budgeted in FY 25 at 3.1 million, which is the 3-year average, including the FY 24 revenues. That average comes out to 3.2 million. Moving on to charges for services and licenses per permits. The bottom of this page, this is charges for services. And as you can see over in this corner, it pretty much came in on target. The overall grouping brought in an additional $67,672. The licenses and permits came in with exceeded budget projections by $411,542 or 35% over budget. The things that I would highlight is this was mainly due to the building inspection services. As you can see, we budgeted $465,000, came in at $728,000. So that 263% actually makes up 64% of this amount here. The other high numbers or things I would just mention in here is a periodic inspections. Those are when they go around and inspect the theaters, restaurants, nightclubs, group homes, multifamily, religious halls, lecture halls, and dance halls. So that has actually increased a little bit. And then the other one is the health department, that 22,000 also added to it. And the wiring inspector is also came in. Actually, that came in above as well. And plumbing. So the building is doing really well. I think we started to see this in FY23 and it continues. So we continue down to federal revenue, the Medicaid reimbursement for schools. This, as we've talked about before, it fluctuates year to year. We don't really know what we will get. However, it does increase a little bit. Last year, we received $200,528, which was used in the FY25 school budget. This year, we received $209,175, which will be used to support the FY26 school budget to support special educational services. The next section, the state revenues, also known as local aid, which starts at the bottom of this page and continues over to the next. These are part of the cherry sheets and are voted as part of the Massachusetts state budget. They generally come in as budgeted based on the numbers we are given. And just a reminder for those folks who are still relatively new or folks that aren't familiar with the term cherry sheet, this is the official notification from the Commissioner of Revenue of the upcoming fiscal year's state aid assessments to the cities, towns, and regional school districts. And they were named the cherry sheet because of the cherry colored paper on which the notifications were originally printed on and mailed to the communities. So again, if you look at these, they are just under, and as I stated, they come in when they come in. However, if we go back one page, the abatement for vets, blind, surviving spouse, last year we got a late payment in August, about the 29th of August. in the amount of 91,000, which allowed us to meet budget. And in FY 2022, we got a last minute payment from the state for the prior year in September. So I am still expecting one more payment so that we will actually meet the budget projection here. Similarly, charter school aid, we are short here. And I believe, again, looking at in the past, actually looking down through there, we are still missing the June payment. So I expect last year that came in on August 19th. So I'm still expecting that $51,000 to come in by the end of the month. So we move on to parking tickets. We collected $788,078, which is $200,000 greater, more than last year, which is probably due to the fact that we have been more fully staffed. These amounts are more in line with what was revenue we received in 2018 and 2019, but is still less than the revenue of 2017 or prior, where the revenue was really in the 900,000 range. And again, you know, we may never get back there, and maybe we all hope that that's true because we have Park Mobile, and therefore it's more convenient for people to park when they are visiting our downtown. So the miscellaneous category came in significantly over, which we've all discussed, was due to the interest on investments budget line and the changes that the treasurer collector made in FY 2023. Of the $2.5 million, 28% of that interest is directly from ARPA funds. 700, that's equals about 727,000. As I mentioned, this is the budget line that varies and has always been budgeted with caution. As you saw on August 5th, when I shared that graphic, we have not seen interest like this. You know, we did not budget it high in this year for FY 2024. I did not budget it as high for FY 25. But we will be looking at this for FY 2026. It's in, you know, again, but it's important to note that if the Fed changes the interest rates, this line will be affected. However, I still think there is room for us to look at this more closely in FY 26 because of the changes that the collector made. The other line in this category came in at $368,289. That's the miscellaneous receipts. We don't budget this line because it is uncertain and it's not known what may come into this catch-all line. Health and Human Services Department, the community host fees from the grants. We talked about grants before, especially when we made the transfer of the fringe benefits. The city also gets community host fees from all of those grants, and those made up 58% of this 368,000. So again, I don't budget it because we don't know what grants we will actually get or that they are always reliable from year to year. So the good news on all of this is that our general fund revenues exceeded budget projections by 4.7%. That's including the interest. That high interest. If we remove that and assume it was closer to the prior range, our proceeds over budget would have been closer to 2.5% of the $116 million budget of FY 2024. Moving on to the enterprise revenue. Everything in the 3 of the 4 enterprise funds tracked as expected, and overall budget projections were met. We can look a little bit more at the variances. For looking at the sewer, tax title and interest. Well, looking at the sewer, so it came in 688,000 more. That's basically, most of this is that $564,000. And that is mainly due to Coca-Cola is still operating. The last information that we had is Coca-Cola will be done in October. So that accounts for this $564,000. And that's what increased this. As you look at sludge disposal, that came in double. This is another unknown and variable revenue source. It comes from commercial companies filing for industrial discharge permits, connection permits, and trench permits. So that is 67,000. If you look at sewer miscellaneous income, that is various permits. So that also is difficult to judge. And then the sewer interest income, as you'll see on everyone, is a little bit higher, over here than we expected. Sewer-based charges, again, those are actually short. As you can see, we are 64,000 short there. And the DPW director is looking into that to find out what the issue is there. Water revenue, again, we exceeded the budget by 15%, $1.1 million. Looking at that, again, is mostly because of the 800,000 of that is due to the fact that Coca-Cola is still operating and will be until October. And again, we look at the water-based charges, we are a little bit short there, and the DPW director is also looking at those. Whoops, stormwater. So stormwater is only at 94%. And we've seen this the last couple of years, we have been short slightly, and that is because of the credits that the city offers to people in stormwater. So when we budget, these represent the credits that have been given out on stormwater bills. And again, this varies year to year. It depends on the applications. They come in throughout the year and we never know how many people will actually apply. It also has to, for the CPA and low income applications. And then when we look at solid waste, again, we're $20,000 over, but I wanted to note, a couple of things here. One is the DPW director spoke about this at the meeting, that this is a really, this enterprise faces a lot of challenges. But as she noted, the landfill stickers are dropping. So she budgeted 155. We only brought in 93,000. Trash bag sales, similarly, we budgeted 240,000. It's only 203,000. And the things that we are bringing in are lower than we normally expect. So the things that saved us again, and this one is the interest earned, which is the, interest earned, and the leases for the landfill cell tower, and the leases are the extra or third party entities that are on our cell towers. So we get money for that. So that actually saved this line item here. All right. And so going to the next one, the general fund expenses. This is the report that lists all the different departments, their personnel and salary lines and ordinary maintenance lines, which are their expense lines. So you got PS and OM. If you look at the last column on the left, again, this is the column which shows how much of the budget we were used and what the percentage is. What we want to see for the most part when we run down is 100% or less. While there are remaining funds, most are being encumbered. That means that the funds are being held over to pay for an ongoing project or for outstanding invoices. That means work that was contracted for in FY24 or for things that were ordered in FY24, but we haven't completed the project or we haven't received the items. So therefore we can hold on to that money to complete the project or pay for things that were already in play during the fiscal year. This is a yearly process. And as I mentioned at the last meeting and today, the closing of the books on a fiscal year occurs over the whole summer with a hard deadline of September 30th, excuse me. So while you'll see all of these funds in here or all these extra monies here, the encumbrances hasn't actually occurred yet. The money hasn't been moved out. What happens is departments put in for those encumbrances under strict guidelines, and then they get approved, and then they get moved into an encumbrance for the next year. So I'm not going to go through every single budget line. However, at the end of the presentation, I'm happy to go back and talk about anything that you have questions about. Instead, I will jump ahead just to highlight page 8. You'll see capital improvements, and I just want to highlight this because it's $15 million. We talked about this $15 million and the capital projects. So when we talk about the SIP and the projects that get approved, that's this number. These are the projects that are in play right now. We have contracts for them. We have liabilities against the projects. And that's that number right here. That entire number will be encumbered as we move forward with those projects. So I'm just going to jump down to the bottom and talk about the grand total. So we have $19 million, it looks like, unused money. Again, 15 million of that is this for the capital improvement projects. And also you've got to subtract all the encumbrances, which turned out to be like $3.3 million when I added it all up or I'm estimating based on what the departments have submitted. So the bottom line here is $991,000 on our $116 million budget. And then just moving on to the very last one, which is our enterprise funds. These expenses tracked as expected. Many of the unused funds, again, you'll see have to do with vacancies in the PS or personnel services line, or the extra money in capital lines are being encumbered and carried forward for, as I discussed, the projects because as the project spans a fiscal year, we can carry that forward to continue with the project. So for example, looking really fast at the sewer admin line, this line here, $230,000. We had 4 vacancies out of 10 positions. If you look at the water, there's also a PS here for the treatment plant. There is 3 out of I don't have that number. 3 out of so many positions are vacant. So we have at least 3 that are vacant in the treatment plant. And then the water PS similarly has vacancies. We had 4 vacancies out of 17 positions in the water enterprise. And again, looking at the storm drains, similarly, we had 2 FT equivalents, which were equipment operator positions that were vacant. And I do want to say the water enterprise, we are grateful. There was 4 during this year, but we have filled 2 of them. So I won't go through much detail here unless you have questions. The only other thing I would say again, as mentioned by Director Lascalia, the enterprise faces financial challenges. The solid waste in particular, the PS line is very tight to meet the overtime and staffing demands. It covers an employee to carry a pager to support and respond to needs during the weekend operations. So this budget also doesn't have a realistic capital budget. It has $16,000. And if you are familiar, the compactor actually broke at the solid waste department and needed to be repaired, which was, it's not just a quick fix, And it also cost $25,000, which was more than the budget was actually prepared to pay. So this is a tight budget. And I would like to say that as she mentioned, all of these enterprise funds face unique challenges, and the budgets haven't been increased in a long time. So they are what they are going forward. And then and then the last thing is this this document that we created, or that was created in order to give you some past years of how the meals tax, the big ones that we talk about, meals tax, traditional hotel lodging, and cannabis, compare to prior years. So again, looking at this, we brought in for the meals tax for FY 2024, $791,000. It shows you what the estimated state tax is and what the estimated total sales based on the paid sales tax would be. Again, comparing it to the prior year, it's not a huge increase, and then this is 2022, and then 2021, which we know which has got hit, and 2020. So I think the big ones or the important ones to look at are traditional hotel. Again, $1 million for traditional hotel compared to the $970,000 from the prior year, $690 from FY 2022. And of course, the year where we got hit with COVID the most is only $286,000. And again, if we look at cannabis, I want to highlight that this is the first time it's been up since 2020. Again, in 2020, it was 1.6 million. 21, it was 1.3 million. 22, it was 1.1. It's 846,000 in 2023. And now we're seeing it a little bit above. So we'll keep an eye on that as well.
Thank you, Director Nardi. Councilors, questions? Councilor Maori.
Hey, thank you for that. I'm glad we can continue this conversation. There's a lot to take in. It sounds like you don't have the certified free cash number for 2024 yet.
No, that doesn't come in until late November, early December.
Okay, so how, at this point, how much revenue have we received that we did not project?
So based on the revenue reports that we just talked about?
Yeah.
So took in $5.2 million over the budget, projected budget.
That's the 4.7%, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so 5.2 million is that. Okay.
Yep.
And let me just see if I have I had a specific question about the general fund expense. Just, I was curious about the forestry. I'm just trying to learn, how all the different limbs of our, excuse the pun, city work, but it seemed awfully high.
The forestry, are we talking about the general fund expense?
Yes, let me find it. Let's see.
So it's page 5. Page 5 of the expense report.
Yeah. Do you see that? Wait.
Yes. I mean,
okay, thank you.
So if you look at the forestry line,
yeah.
So if you look at, that's the capital line. So you saw the 605,000.
Yeah.
So that is work that is ongoing, and that money is being carried over.
Okay.
For work that is ongoing. And let me see.
Much like the capital, the SIP money?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So if we, give me a minute, I may be able to share some details.
Let's see. Okay, so 5 point. Okay.
And I don't have.
That's
So
okay.
I
I was
have-
just curious.
Sorry. So
No,
I
go ahead.
have Director LaScalia put in for encumbering that money for capital tree removals, trees, and grounds equipment.
Okay.
And for parks, professional and technical work for parks.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, so the 5.2 million, unless something radically changes, that will be that, and maybe tailings from FY 2023 will be the certified free cash amount.
Yes, it will be close to that, plus the 900,000 in turnbacks.
Okay, so
Plus,
900,000.
yep.
No, yeah, and then anything from 2023, the tailings? No.
Not from 23, it'll be what we didn't spend.
Right. Maybe I meant 2024. Yes. Okay.
So the tailings from, tailings is another word for turnbacks.
Right. So that's 900,000.
Yes, that's my
Okay.
budget. That's my estimate for turnbacks.
Okay. So, you know, probably around 6 million or something. But
Yeah,
I guess we will see.
So yes, so that's about the budgeted estimate is about $6 million, which brings us to about 5.3%, which I want to remind everybody, DOR's recommendation is to bring in between 5 and 7% of your budget. So that's 5% of our $116 million budget.
Right.
And again, that's the new money. That's not what we didn't spend all of the money from FY 2020 for free cash.
Okay. Thank you. I might have more questions, but I'm going to digest this. Thank you very much, Director.
I think I saw Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you very much. Shardine, the Department of Public Works, how many staff are we short? I know we went from 19 to 21, then 30. And then when I had talked with Donna about a month ago or so, we were still 15 employees short, which was seasonal. Has that staying at the same, or has that risen?
I know I spoke with the DPW director about this earlier, and she has said that we have about 15 vacancies.
And they're all seasonal, she told me, correct?
That I am not sure.
And she told me she was looking for dire seasonal help. I have another.
They are not, I don't believe they're seasonal. I believe they're full-time employees, not seasonal.
Do you have another question, Councilor?
Yes, I would like to, if you could get that straightened out. Because
Yes, so it is 15 full-time employees, 15 employees, not seasonal.
Okay, and also too, talking about parks and recreation and so forth. What about cemeteries? Is that included in that, where Councilor Maori was talking about the forestry and so forth like that, included parks and recreation? Is cemeteries included with that?
So I believe Director LaScalia is on the call, and I am going to defer to her because she can speak more about her budget than I can about the very details. So if she doesn't mind logging on.
And Laura, could you make Director LaScalia a co-host?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I just can't turn my video on.
Okay, you should be able to now. There you are.
There we go.
Well,
okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hello.
Okay. Hi. So, Councilor, regarding your question about the cemetery, so the money that you see in the Forestry Parks and Cemeteries division includes forestry parks and cemeteries. So we use that capital money in support of all three of those divisions that are under the umbrella division. So any capital projects that we're doing in a cemetery would be part of that money.
Okay, question, Donna, please. I know that with the consultant that was hired, because of the problems occurring in mostly all the cemeteries, there also, I think, was money put off for these cemeteries like West Farms Road, up there by the VFW and so forth, Bridge Road, and that which some money was donated. Thank God for that. Do you know, Donna, when they would be coming out with going into the cemeteries? I have great concerns of the stones that are just lying on the ground, and they've been there for quite a while, of how much money is broken down for each cemetery here. I have people questioning me about this. And if you go by West Farms Road and take a look, there's quite a bit of them just lying on the ground for quite some time. And I know when we had that consultant coming in, and so much had to be done here, so much had to be done there. They took the fence down, which I appreciated that. But I'm concerned here about the cemeteries, the way that West Farms Road looks like. And even a resident from Ward 7 always Wendy, would ride her bike, give me a call and talk about the looks of that. And in due respect of people who have passed away. And there is some big history in that cemetery. And I'm really concerned about how much money is broken down for each cemetery out of the DPW, of the Recreation Department and so forth.
Yes, Counselor. So the 19303 accounts that Director Nardi referenced that have capital monies actually have an appropriation for the cemeteries. So every year we ask for $25,000 to be appropriated for work, just like you're describing in the cemetery. So I think you're referring to the 2016 studies of all three cemeteries. So
Yes.
Bridge Street, Park Street, and West Farms. Spring Grove was not studied as part of that process, but the gravestones were all cataloged and sorted into categories: priority 1, 2, and 3 gravestones. And we have actually restored all priority 1 gravestones in all 3 of those cemeteries. But what has happened is over the years, we have storms or we have vandalism. So, the priority 2 gravestones are now priority 1 gravestones. So what we do is we take that 19303 account, and that's the first 5 digits of the account. That's just kind of how we keep it financially straight. But we take the balance of money in that 19303 account and we use it to do gravestone restoration as we can. So we did quite a bit of work in Park Street in 2021. We had a gravestone conservator come in and do several stones. Each stone can cost upwards of $3,000. So we're talking about thousands of stones. So in order for the city to go through and fix all of the stones, you'd be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we actually have, for those of you who know Martha Lyon, she is kind of a historian and does this sort of work professionally. And so she is working with us and is under contract of one of those encumbrances that Director Nardi referred to address the priority 2 gravestones in both West Farms and Park Street. And we'll be getting a gravestone conservator in. It's not going to be this year, but probably in the spring, because you can't do that work once it's very temperature dependent. But unfortunately, we do not have the financial resources to deal with all of the needs. There are many stones which are broken. We get kids in the cemetery, they knock the stones over because they're very skinny. So we do the best we can to stay on top of it. But ultimately at $3,000 a stone, that $25,000 goes very, very quickly.
Okay. I also would like to know exactly, Donna, because I know when I talked with you about how many people have left, and you talked distinctly about seasonal to me. Have you filled those positions to help you with seasonal work?
No, we're not able to fill the seasonal position. So ideally, I have 10 seasonals who work for us in the parks, in maintaining the parks and the cemeteries. I have 2 seasonals right now, so we're short 8 people.
8 people?
And that's on top of our 15 FTEs. We just had 2 resignations, folks going to work for higher paying jobs, like $10 an hour more. And we just lost 2 people in the last 2 weeks, and that's full-time employees.
Right, it's happening everywhere. I'm hearing it from one of my residents who also is an assistant director to another Department of Public Works. It's been going on for quite a long time. I think that's, I also want to talk about sewer liens and so forth like that. How do residents actually pay for that? If anybody has a sewer lien or whatever, or a water lien, what does the department do for that to help a resident out?
So we bill for water and sewer service. We bill quarterly. And when a resident does not pay their bill, it gets turned over to the collector's office, and then it gets liened onto the property. I'm unclear of the collector's process. My department's obligation is to bill, truth in billing. So we bill for the actual usage. The usage is attached to the property, and it is billed to the property owner of record. If they don't pay their bill within a certain statutory time frame, it then goes to the collector.
Thank you very much, Donna. That's it.
Thank you. Over to Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Nardi, for the presentation. I just wanted to follow up for briefly on Councilor Maori's points that she was making about how we establish that free cash number, just so I understand and everybody understands. It includes the 5.2 million, which we find at the end of the general fund revenue report on page 5, and then in addition to that, there is the 900,000 that Director Nardi, you estimate will remain from the general fund expenses, which currently shows up as almost 19.5 million unspent. But that is not entirely uncommitted money. And in fact, most of that is committed except for the 900,000. Is that correct?
So I'm not sure what you mean by committed. So the 900, so are we talking about the 19 million?
Yes.
Yes. So the 19 million minus only the 900,000 is coming back to the city. Otherwise, all that money has been committed.
Yes.
We have liabilities against that money or reasons that we're encumbering it to continue projects and uses that we have already started.
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay. So I had one specific question about the Water Enterprise Fund for either our Director Nardi or the Director LaScalia, perhaps because it's on my mind because I just had a communication from a constituent yesterday who just paid their first quarter water and sewer bill about exactly understanding that the increase in the base rate charges that we approved a year ago that have been in effect now for a year, we're anticipating Coca-Cola's departure, which now is scheduled, as I heard tonight, for the end of October. So there was 1.1 million in unexpected revenue that is in the Water Enterprise Fund, which of course is a closed fund. Can either director talk about how that 1.1 million will be spent?
I'm happy to answer the question. So as you said, Counselor, it is a closed system. So when free cash is certified in November, that money stays with the enterprise. And at that time, we will assess the needs of the enterprise and return to council to ask for either an appropriation to a necessary capital expense or some sort of anticipated, OM overage, if that may be the case, or we would ask for a transfer to stabilization for future use. But it does stay within the enterprise. So we will, it's good timing because we're sort of 6 months into the fiscal year, or nearly 6 months into the fiscal year. So we can get a good gauge on sort of how we're trending within the enterprise really by the end of this calendar year. And then we can make good decisions on, how that money will be spent.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Rothenberg.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a few questions. We'll start a conversation with you, Director Nardi. My first question is, what is the undesignated fund balance that was unspent at the end of the year, if any?
1.7 million.
Okay, so we can add that to our 6 million that will be certified.
Yep.
Okay. And the 5.2 million, did that include anything that's going to be returned to a particular department, or that entire 5.2 will go forward as free cash?
$5.2 million in revenue, to the best of my knowledge, is staying. There's no movement of that money. So yes, I believe the 5.2 million.
Okay, thanks. My next question, the 991 non-encumbered expenses that we didn't spend, that seems to be sort of a pattern for us, that we come in sort of 1 to 2 million under. And I'm wondering, if we look at historical trends, will we see patterns in where those unspent monies are being unspent? In other words, like in the same departments or the same roles?
So yeah, as part of the process, what I have been doing is going through all of the overages for each of the departments, looking at why they are over, categorizing it, writing down and keeping track of why they are over, so that we can make adjustments if it's applicable in the next budget season. So that is what happens over this whole summer as we look at where departments are. For the most part, when you see in personnel lines, it's because we've had changes in personnel. So you'll see if people who've been here long-term, experienced folks have left and new people come in, you'll see an overage in the personnel line. I know some of the departments, as Director Lascalia has talked about, are short-staffed, so you'll see overages in those lines. I went through almost all of them, and some of the ones that I was concerned about, we've made adjustments to, but I think for the most part, you are going to always see some, in a $116 million budget, out of that whole thing, you are going to always see a percentage. It's never going to come in, at least in my 23 years of experience, it's not going to come in exactly at 100%. Accurate. A lot is happening in this city, and that $116 million budget, 900 less $1 million off of that is not a lot. So.
Yeah, that's a good segue to my next question. And I mentioned this at our special meeting on Monday. I noticed that your bottom line revenue from quarter to quarter, year to year for the past 3 years is extraordinarily consistent, despite the fluctuations in the estimates on the line items. So I was just wondering how you explain that phenomenon.
So we use the 3 to 5 year averages for prediction. And as you know, we've talked many times, we use best practices and what's recommended by the Department of Revenue to create. In the past, it's been 3 to 5%, now 5 to 7% in our revenue, so that we can support the entire health of the city financially. We talk about, we want to make sure we're maintaining reserves so that we can do capital projects, so that we can address capital needs when they are unforeseen, which we will talk about, I hope, later in the evening when one of the orders we put forward. So for all of those reasons, we actually do budget for the purposes as recommended by the Department of Revenue to make sure we bring in 5 to 7% to support capital, to support our other responsibilities as a municipality.
So I do want to get to that. That is my last point, but this question is a little bit different. It's why are the revenues at the bottom line for the whole quarter so consistent? 19 to 20% in quarter one, 47% in quarter two, 76 in quarter three, 103 to 104 in quarter four. How can those come out so consistently when the line items, the smaller pieces of it, are so erratic? How do you do that? How do you accomplish that?
So this is not a perfect science, but again, I use the 3 to 5 averages of the system that I inherited. You know, as we've talked about, our accountant says our policies work, so I continue with that process and just continue to use the averages for each of the budget lines.
Okay, so we don't know why that works, but that might be some kind of a fundamental phenomenon with accounting, possibly.
Well, I also think we want to talk about, so I mean, the little pieces aren't as a big deal. We really focus on the major pieces. So when we talk about the 3 to 5% are the big heavy hitters that bring in the money. So yes, there are adjustments and there's changes in the other lines, but it's really the big ones that we focus on. And I think that's what brings in the bottom lines in each of the categories.
Okay, great, thanks. That helps me as I will look to it closer to understand it better. The next question, well, just on that before I leave, I know
if I could,
of this year, we didn't have anything in the interest line, this big interest line we've all been talking about that ended at 2 million. I noticed that quarter one and quarter two were identical reportings. Did you notice that? And
I did not.
What's that?
I did not. You mean the percentage that came in for each quarter?
Yeah, the amount that was reported earned in quarter two was identical to quarter one on that big interest line. So I think maybe we were like $500,000 maybe short that quarter in terms of what we actually had generated versus what was reported, would be my guess. And President Jarrett, if you're trying to move to someone else, that's fine. I can come back for another.
I'm not sure I understand your, sorry.
I saw Mayor Shara wanted to add to the conversation, but I'm not sure if it was about this current point. So whenever you would like to jump in.
It was actually, excuse me, the previous point, and then Director Nardi made it, just that the biggest pieces are consistent, right? So if it's like property tax, things like that, there are some of these larger items are going to come in consistently and on, you know, at the amount expected, or, you know, money that were coming in from the state. So some of these larger items that kind of make up that bottom line do tend to be more consistent than some of these other ones that fluctuate.
Right, and the taxes make up, you know, 68% of our entire budget, and the big ones we talk about, local excise tax. Now, back to your interest, you're saying for quarter one, so I have 356,000 came in for quarter one, quarter two, 472,000. That's just, that's interest without ARPA. Is that what you're saying came in similarly? Is that?
You know what? I have my book in front of me and we can follow up on it separately, but it's the big one that we were talking about that ended at like 2 million.
Right. So what your question is, why is that so similar?
I actually saw identical figures, and since I don't have my paper and I don't want to take everyone's time, we can do this in an email.
Okay, because I don't think they're exact, so I'll take a look.
Okay, so then I'll just bring it to my last question, if that's okay, President Jarrett.
Yes.
Thanks. So I just want to make first a point, which is sort of a political disagreement between us, and we don't have to argue it, but I want to make it for the public watching, that we have this fundamental disagreement about what the DOR recommends that we set aside in free cash, or how far we underestimate. When I read what the DOR writes, they have sort of a rule of thumb that they say, if you're looking for a generic recommendation, we would say this number, and that's their 5 to 7. They also have a huge preamble that says that you should be setting that figure anew based on what your actual savings needs are, right? And so the real range that they look at for cities is between 2 to 14%. And we might be more a city that should be aiming for the 2% because we have so much in savings. So I just wanted to leave that there for the public. And, you know, to that point, we ended this year with 6 million in play of revenue and expenses, right? That we could have had in a budget had we forecasted it that way. Maybe less if we had been trying to set aside 2%. We ended up with about 5% plus the million from expenses, right? And what we ended up doing this year was we came in with that $6 million of play that we didn't use because we're following this sort of policy that you say is a best practice. And we came in asking the schools to give, to work with $4 million less than level services. Of that 4 million, 2 million of it just went away for good, right? And 2 million of it we gave in one-time funds to them. So they're now 2 million less on one side, and then they've got this really unstable 2 million that's a one-time fund. And you opened by talking about the override being required to secure that 2 million and roll it into the base. And I think that probably for people listening and following, that was kind of a big statement that needs a little more explaining, because we really need to know what is the security for the schools for that 2 million. Because again, we started out 4 million under, we gave them just a 2 million that's kind of unstable now. And you're saying without an override, it won't be stable. And there is no override. I mean, I know we're talking about a future potential override, but right now there is no override. There was like $6 million of play we didn't use. There is interest in our different accounts, right? And so I'd really like to hear from you more than just, we can't roll that into the base until we have an override. If you could expand on what your further thinking is, because what I don't want to do is see a pattern of defunding the schools by a 50% figure of the 4 million, then filling 50 of it with an unstable 2 million so that we can then justify getting rid of that later because it's not stable. So what was the discussion, or what is the plan around that 1.9? If you could, thank you.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so when we talk about interest on the stabilization funds or on reserves, remember stabilization funds, the interest has to stay there. So I just want to be clear about that. But so what I meant, and just to be clear, when I talk about the 1.9 million, the mayor has committed this 1.9 million in from reserves in 2025 with the intention that we are rolling that in. In order to do that, we need to have an override. In order to sustain that $2 million, because we can't keep using, we talk about the only time you should ever use reserves for ongoing or reoccurring costs are when you have a plan. And the mayor has put forth her plan is that we need an override in order to capture that money and keep it with the schools. And that is our intent. The reason we delayed or we canceled the November because it was very specific of when. So we had to cancel it. We also had a state deadline because it was part of the state election process. So we needed to cancel that. But we have not said we are not going to have an override, because that is the only way to actually capture that 1.9 million in reoccurring revenue as we go forward. And the reason I say I have informed or I have recommended to the mayor that the most that the city can absorb in reoccurring revenue for FY25 is that $1.9 million. And then in FY26, whether we can use reserves again, because we're talking about pushing revenues, that may be an option. It may not. As we mentioned on August 5th, we want to see what the first quarter and second quarter revenues are, what the election looks like, what the Fed does with interest rates. All of that will play into when the override has to occur.
Thanks. And so I just want to say in closing, again, to the public, Director Nardi and I have a disagreement about this. I don't believe that the only way to give the schools that 1.9 is through an override. I believe that you can adjust your free cash ratio, and that $6 million of play we had this year could have been money that could have been built into a budget. And we'll talk about that in future dates and future proceedings. But I'm glad to hear that for FY25, Director Nardi, you do a plan to give that 1.9 back to the schools in some form or fashion in the meantime. Thank you.
And if I may just respond,
Yep.
I would like to just make clear, and I realize we have a difference of opinion, but that $2.5 million that we got in interest is dependent on how much money we have in the bank and what the interest rates are. So you can't rely on that $2.5 million every year. As I said, if we took that out of the equation, we're at 2.5% of our revenue. So exactly for overages and revenue, which is exactly where you talked about where we could be. So that amount it's not reliable. It's reoccurring for the moment. We all know interest rates are going to change. So I just put out that cautionary tale. And again, yes, I think it's important that the city make sure we have the reoccurring revenue as we go forward. That's our plan.
Thank you. Thank you both. Other counselors, questions? So I have a question. Thank you for answering so many. I go through and I come up with all these questions and most of them get answered. So we were at 75% for the third quarter, right?
Yes.
Or somewhere around there.
Yep.
And we in the third quarter, we knew we received a considerable amount of interest in that, but other things must have been under, because otherwise we would have been over 75% in that third quarter. And were those were things that were unpredictably under?
So I'm not sure that they were all unpredictable. I think my first instinct was that we had $1.5 million in interest, and we were just at the 75% mark. So yes, I knew we would still had, and we were at 75% for our big, we were over in some of our the ones we look at, the hotel, the motel. We were at 75% or more in all of those. We were at close to 75% for taxes. So the whole idea was that what was bringing the total was that 1.5 million. So it wasn't like I was looking at, like the state aid or our taxes or those big ones that we talk about that carry us through every year. Those were all at 75% as well. So based on my looking at it in May, in April and May, when we were doing when we were doing the budget predictions and the mayor was talking about the budget, that was my recommendation to her, was that I was worried that we had pushed revenues a bit too far, that we were too optimistic, and that we would need an override in order to support the schools to the level of 8.5%. So I take responsibility for that. That was my recommendation to her. Based on what I saw when the revenues came in and the way I was looking at it, I know the mayor does not want to overtax people if she doesn't, if it's not necessarily. So therefore, I called her as soon as I felt like we were at a point where we needed to make a decision because of the timelines we were in. So I take full responsibility for that. I reached out to the mayor to change my recommendation. And requested that we look further into it before we move forward.
Right, thank you. So as of the third quarter, you were still expecting to be a little over 100% because of some of the other things, but it was not to this extent.
No.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the staff? Councilor Moulton.
Yeah, just to follow up on the discussion about interest. I understand there's volatility based on how much money, how much investment is earning that interest, and on potential changes in interest rates. But the treasurer has made some decisions about investments that took advantage of the interest rates that were available. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
And that remains in play, correct?
Yes.
So those decisions that were that were made and that proved to be sound decisions are a foundation for, I think I understand that that's not rock solid, but I think that it's probably fair to say that we'll continue to see some favorable earnings on interest. But your concern is it may not be as substantial as what we experienced in FY24.
Yes, that is correct. I feel that the FY24 interest on investments number informs what we will do in FY 2026. And I think that budget line, the treasurer collector and I have had discussions about what we think that can be pushed to, reasonable, and still be in a being cautious, but using that revenue line more in FY 2026.
Okay, so I would say I don't want it to be lost in the discussion about forecasting the fact that sound decisions were made, and I commend treasurer collector and the mayor's budget team in total for making those decisions, which have put us in a very good place at the end of FY24 in terms of interest.
Thank you.
Any counselors who haven't spoken who want to ask a question? Okay, we'll go back to Councilor Rothenberg.
Thanks. My last area that I just wanted to raise with you while you're here, Director Nardi, my constituents are really more engaged in finances than I think is maybe typical for what we would see, which is, makes it an interesting time for you, I'm sure, to be the financial director, because there's a lot of talk around financial policies. And I'm trying to provide them with as much information as I can. And I find that there's a lot that goes on in the city that we don't have access to, right? Like I was writing with you today about how much interest there is accruing in the stabilization funds. And I think your response was that there was like $300,000 to $400,000 that accrued in the non-enterprise stabilization funds. And then today, for example, we talk about the 15 million that's part of capital projects that will be encumbered. And yes, we have access to the SIP books, but it doesn't really give us a clear picture of what all is going on. And I had raised this at a prior meeting where I said, is it possible over the summer for you to take time to prepare for us sort of a summary of what's going on with the assigned and unassigned funds? And the mayor's position was that you didn't have time for the precious resources to be spent on that. And council would have to, open in a formal information request together. But I'm just wondering if we can try to work on even smaller things or even bigger picture views that we can give to the people about what's going on with all this money that we have accumulated. For example, even if just the $15 million, if there could be some way efficiently for you to let us know as counselors, kind of here's all the projects that are still hanging out there. Here's where this is all going. This is what we're still working on. I think that would really help narrow the conversations that we're having with constituents so that it's not so much about is the ball hidden, but more here's what the ball is doing. It's very busy. And I think as we sort of are talking about how do we move forward into the next budget season and how do we move forward as a council when there's this heightened tension around resources, it would be great to just have more information than what we're used to getting. Even with your quarterly reports, if we could have variance reports, when things are 10% above or below, not just the oral, but something written that we can hand out. Maybe we can have a meeting about that sometime. I just sort of want to leave that there for you as an item of interest for Ward 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands, we will close the presentation, and I'd like to call a 5-minute recess. We will be back at 8:10. resuming in 3, 2. Welcome back to the Northampton City Council. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. I'm going to read the consent agenda and then ask if there are any removals. The minutes of the special city council meeting on June 17th, 2024, and the regular meetings of June 6th and June 20th. 24.114, reappointments to the Zoning Board of Appeals. This received a positive recommendations from City Services on August 5th. Maureen Scanlon, reappointment, and David Bloomberg, also a reappointment. 24.116, in order to accept Mass General laws authorizing annual increases in senior exemption amounts in second reading. 24.118, in order to authorize expending sidewalk gift account money, second reading. 24.123, an application for a secondhand dealer license for Ryan's Jewelers. 24.127, the appointment of Benjamin Weil as CAPA Director this is for referral to City Services. 24.128, appointments to various committees for referral to City Services. To the Agricultural Commission, John J. Bobola, a reappointment. To the Urban Forestry Commission, Sue Lofthouse, a reappointment. And to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Aaron Irvin, to fill a vacancy. Are there any removals from the consent agenda? Seeing none, roll call please on approval. May I have a
Move to approve
motion?
the consent agenda.
Seconded.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Moulton and seconded by Councilor Clemmer. No discussion on the consent agenda, so roll call please.
Councilor Dobbs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Clemmer,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
and Councilor Rothenberg.
Abstain.
So that passes with 8 yes votes and 1 abstention. Councilor Moulton, do we have a date for the next City Services? I know that would normally fall on Labor Day.
It would normally fall on Labor Day, and we have decided not to meet on Labor Day. We will be meeting at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, September 4th, to take up the 2 items that have been referred to us.
Great, thank you. So now we move to financial orders on first reading. 24.124, in order to appropriate $354,250 from stabilization for replacement of Leeds Elementary School boiler. And I'm just going to go ahead and read the whereas clauses because I think this is important information. Whereas Leeds Elementary School has 2 steam boilers, one of which is leaking and inoperable. And whereas the boiler has already been repaired several times in the past few years and would continue to need regular repairs. And whereas due to the age of the boiler, replacement parts are no longer manufactured, making it difficult to find suitable replacements. And whereas the current setup of heating and ventilation equipment operates at an overall efficiency of 61%, thus repairing and continuing to invest in any steam boiler will never result in emissions reductions or operating cost savings. And whereas replacing the existing boiler with 2 modern modulating condensing boilers, which are already owned by the city, would increase efficiency to between 92 to 97%. And whereas replacement would provide many other benefits, including reduced annual operating costs, lower fossil gas consumption, improved system redundancy, and a significant reduction in carbon dioxide emissions from current levels. And whereas this replacement would help take the Leeds Elementary School building a step closer to the goal of transitioning it to zero carbon emissions. Now therefore be it resolved, the City Council appropriates $354,250 from the General Stabilization Fund for the purposes of replacing the boiler at the Leeds Elementary School. Would the mayor's office like to speak to this?
Sure, I will, I'll start off and then actually Director Weil is here and can kind of walk through all of this. So just, the whereas is really sort of paint the overall picture, this was just discovered during the annual preventative maintenance that is done on all the buildings, that these two boilers are leaking and inoperable. They were working last year, so this was a surprise, but this is why we do these checks annually before, particularly for school buildings before school starts. These boilers need to be functional by October 15th legally. So this is something that has to be dealt with quickly. And so Dr. Weil will go through sort of the decisions and the discussion that brought us to this idea. But again, I just want to point out, this is why we have stabilization funds. This was an unanticipated failure of these boilers. And again, something that must be addressed by October 15th. So that is the importance of having these funds available for these kind of unexpected capital expenses. So with that, I will hand it over to Ben.
Welcome, Director.
Thank you, Councilor Jarrett, and thank you, councilors, for considering this request. So I can give you the narrative of how we discovered this and how we came to this decision, or if you're feeling like you just want to ask questions, I can also simply answer questions. But do you have a preference? I don't want to waste people's time.
I'm happy. I think the whereas gave a good summary.
Yeah.
I would like to know. So these boilers that we already have, how do we happen to have them in good condition?
Oh, yeah. So when the state sold to the city for $1 33 King Street, it came with two practically brand new modern condensing modulating boilers. And they're sitting there doing nothing. That particular property won't be able to use gas, and however it ends up being disposed of. So this is material that would probably be scrapped. So we looked into the cost for rigging and extracting it from the place and moving it to the space, and found that that was significantly less expensive than purchasing new boilers. So that's how we have those boilers. And it just happened that I was able to calculate the heat load for the Leeds Elementary, and it almost perfectly matches those boilers, which is just pure happenstance.
Thanks. Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes, I have a question for the mayor or Director Nardi.
Go ahead.
Thank you. If you could just help me understand your thinking about when you use the general stabilization fund versus when you use pay-as-you-go capital or capital stabilization or undesignated fund balance. So just talk to me about the choice of fund, or sort of how you usually would think about this or make these choices.
Sure. I mean, well, and Director Nardi, you can speak to this more. First of all, we can't use the undesignated fund balance right now because after the end of the year, until it is certified, it's not available. So those funds aren't available at this time. And then Director Nardi, do you want to talk about how we determine what goes to capital, and then, for unexpected expenses, how we determine.
Modify, also add the climate, it sounds like, as another stabilization fund. So thank you. I'll look forward to Director Nardi's answer.
So yeah, for the SIP, the cash capital that you talked about is generally for those items that are less than $100,000. So those are the smaller items. That's cash capital. For unforeseen items, things that we're doing not during the capital or the SIP process, the capital improvement program process, I generally recommend to the mayor that we use the general stabilization funds. And then when we were actually going through the capital improvement program, that's when we really focus on using the capital stabilization fund. And then we haven't really used we haven't used the climate mitigation, because again, we were waiting for the CAPA department to get up and running, and Director Wheel and I have already started to have conversations about the projects that will be moving forward, and those will be focused with those funds. We'll be discussing when to use those funds. Does that answer your question? You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Does this mean anything about plans for consolidation, that we would be investing this much money into the boiler system rather than repairing what we have? Plans for school consolidation?
I could offer an answer to that if
Sure.
that's helpful. So regardless of what happens with the schools, it's going to take quite a while, whether it's building new schools or revising, whatever is decided. We have to be able to operate these schools for perhaps 10 years, or perhaps a good deal longer. So, we have a need now, right? So that's part of it. The second part is that it seems to me likely, but again, there's a lot that's unknown. A lot of this planning hasn't happened, that we would probably end up using some of the schools. So some of the school buildings are more suited to being added to, updated, et cetera. And Leeds happens to be one where we've already spent money, well, I would say, on the envelope of the building, such that these boilers are part of that long-term plan. So whether Leeds Elementary School is in its current configuration in terms of education and how we distribute students across the city for 10 years, 15 years, we don't know. But some form of heat has to be available. Right now, we are working on a plan that will enable us to stop using steam in the 1950s portion of the building that currently needs steam. And once we're able to do that, we're actually able to remove the remaining steam boiler. But the other, much larger portion of the school, the 1990s portion, actually uses circulating hot water. And so these boilers, let's say in the future we do manage to get, say, a ground source heat pump to provide circulating hot water to condition, and I want to add cool. So heat and cool the schools using the existing distribution system. These boilers will sit there as backup, right? So even if they're no longer the key, and with boilers, their life cycle is not in years, it's in firing cycles. So if they're sitting there as backup, that means they last for a really, really, really long time. And so they're a good long-term investment. And of course, the other thing is that, that they're repairable, they're modern, they have parts that are easily accessible. So there are a bunch of good reasons for that. And of course, in the meantime, let's say we don't manage to do anything that we want to do for 15 years, which I hope is not the case, right? I'm hoping to get things done in 5 years. But let's say we don't manage to. These boilers would be providing savings relative to the boiler that we would have to fix. So doing nothing is not an option. It's just a question of which option we take. This option does cost more up front, but it's predictable. The other option could start to cost almost the same amount, but we just don't know until we take it apart and commit. And I'd rather not commit to that because it's not really part of the future of this school, regardless. But again, we need.
Days
Sorry.
is your buyback?
Sorry, say it again.
How many days is your buyback on the savings, do you think?
It's not days. I mean, quite frankly, natural gas is not insanely expensive, but here's the difference between capital and operating budget, right? So yes, this is a capital expenditure, but it's changing the operating budget of the school by about $18,000 per year. It's causing that savings, which is then predictable. And of course, then we have to estimate inflation. So if we're doing kind of an honest net present value estimate, yes, the boilers probably take between 11 and 14 years to pay for themselves, after which they're providing a net benefit. But that is assuming two things. One, it's assuming that the repairing the failed boiler costs the minimum amount, right? So that we don't open it up and discover it costs a lot more. And it takes a fairly conservative, that is to say, safe estimate of the cost of installing the boilers that we're able to recover from 33 King. And obviously that's a lot less than if we had to also buy new boilers. So it's kind of about the opportunity, but there are a bunch of other reasons why why this is part of that future way that the building can work, right? So I talked about that we can use the hydronic or circulating hot water system also for cooling once we connect it to a chiller. And as we know, cooling is increasingly important as we get more hot days, but it's also one of the few factors that have been really shown to show better test scores, well-being, cognitive capability, cognitive performance among students is the existence or presence or absence of cooling. So it's really important to get there. Part of what this does is it allows us to carve off part of the school, the steam part, work on it, get it electrified, ventilated properly, which it's very difficult to do now, and cooled. Then, or probably in the next phase, we're able to take the hydronic portion of the school, which is now operating at a 27% annual savings, right? So this is in the future, and we're able to integrate a chilled water system and improve ventilation as well, so that we can actually increase the beneficial circumstances of education in that school. So this is part of that plan, which eventually becomes just the backup heating system, but it's kind of a stage.
Yeah, we all agree. We want all of our schools to have good heating and cooling. The last question is, who are we paying and what are we getting with this money? Right? So what's the service that we're buying and who are we buying it from?
Okay, so in order to, so keep in mind that the first thing to keep in mind is that there's an urgency, right? So we have to get this done. Heat has to be turned on by October 15th. So we have split up the extraction of the boilers from where they are from the installation into two separate portions. One, so that we can procure them under Chapter 25A. Chapter 25A is a state procurement law that allows us for energy projects to work with a project expediter who's been approved by utilities, and then work with a contractor. So ISB, and I have actually forgotten what that acronym stands for, but it's the company that has been on call because they're on a different statewide contract that helped us calculate, basically deliver an estimate. They kind of worked really hard quickly to come in and deliver us an estimate of costs and calculate how to do it and organize how to do it. We're working with a project expediter so that we can get installation of the boiler, so we have to disassemble the failed boiler, and actually I'll tell you in a minute, save the parts, because it turns out that the DPW has a boiler that's also failing that needs those parts. And then we have spare parts for the steam boiler that still is in Leeds, because until we actually get rid of it, we need to be able to repair it. So those parts are very, very hard to come by because they're not made anymore. So they do that. Then they have to move the steam. This is all dealing with the steam section. They have to move the steam condensate tank and pumps over to serve the remaining boiler. And that leaves room for the new condensing boilers. We install the condensing boilers. They're large enough that it requires some rigging. Then we have to install, and it turns out this is about the most expensive part, the venting. And so we have to go up behind the stage and then out the wall. And so there's penetration of brick and all that, there's work. But the point is, this is actually something that can get done in time. If we get started kind of right away, we can
but we don't have contractors hired yet, or we didn't put it out to bid for them or whatever.
We don't have to. Using Chapter 25A, you don't go out to bid. Instead, you're working with a project expediter, and
they will contractors.
Say it again.
Will the project expediter pick the contractors?
Well, in this case, we have asked the project expediter to work with the contractor who we initially found, largely because they've already provided a tremendous amount of service, and we wouldn't be able to get
So
that
who-
done.
That is
And-
what I'm.
Sorry, if you could let Dr. Wiles finish, Counselor.
They're in industrial steel and boilers is what ISB stands for. And I'll say that was Katie Deppen who texted me that just now. And we owe her a debt of gratitude for knowing about the existing boilers, identifying the problem early enough that we can actually do something about it. She and her team did preventative maintenance a little on the early side compared to last year, and that's how we found it in time to actually be able to contract it. Because time is of the essence, to go out to bid would make it almost impossible to get this project done in time for the October 15th deadline. That's a really hard legal deadline. We have to have all the systems installed, reconfigured, and running. So using Chapter 25A is a way to select a contractor. Things can't come in at roughly the budget that you would expect, but there are things that are unexpected, challenges with rigging, challenges with venting in Leeds school itself. But anyway, so you work using Chapter 25A as a legal procurement path, and then we worked with this project expediter to kind of access the services of ISB.
And I see Mayor Shara, did you want to jump in?
Thanks. Actually, I was just going to make a point that Director Weil made, which was I wanted to make that point that there's additional recycling that we're going to do, and that these are parts that are actually needed for the DPW. So I just wanted to make that point, but Ben already did it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Moulton.
Thank you for your explanations, Director Weil. I have two questions for you. One, you have described the potential uncertainties in repair costs for the existing boilers. Even under the best case scenario in repair, it would not bring those existing boilers to the fuel efficiency that the new modulating boilers will provide. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, not even close. Yeah, it would turn them to where they are now.
So in addition to uncertain financial costs, the fuel efficiency is below what we could achieve with the new with the modulating boilers.
Yes, that's the beauty of condensing.
Yes, and so my second question is, if the state had not included these two operable boilers in its sale of the property at 33 King Street to the city, would you be recommending something similar to these to replace the boilers at Leeds?
To be honest, I would be. I wouldn't be as excited about the opportunity, like there's just the chance that we can recycle some material. It might be, it was hard to get a number, so we actually looked at another boiler, and we found not the same boiler, not quite as efficient as the ones we got from the state, and it would have been, I'm not remembering it perfectly, but about another $100,000 or so, but they wouldn't be available for 3 weeks. And because of our timeline, that would have been a big problem as well.
In my view, this is an opportunity not to be lost. We have two boilers that are efficient, currently sitting unused. They will do the job at Leeds. They're available immediately, and we're also salvaging parts from the inefficient boilers to be used elsewhere in the city. I think this is a great opportunity, and I move for suspension of rules.
Come on, I got my
Is
hand.
there a second?
Second.
Was that Councilor Maori for the second?
That was me.
Councilor Labarge.
Councilor Labarge
Thank
for the
you.
second.
Also, too, I
Okay.
had my hand up.
Yes, but once someone makes a motion, don't worry, we'll come back to you. but once someone makes a motion, that
I
supersedes
know, I don't get it.
someone
till
having
my
a hand,
was
but so I see you. So the motion was made by Councillor Moulton and seconded by Councillor Labarge to suspend the rules. Is there discussion on suspension of rules? Councillor Rothenberg.
Yeah, I won't stand in the way of this. I support the schools, but with the speed and the rapidity with which we make large expenditures concerns me and has concerned me since we talked about Memorial Hall. I understand that now we're on this deadline. I understand the weather. I also understand that this boiler has been breaking for however many years. I don't know exactly when we knew that we would have these new boilers. I just want to flag for City Hall that the large rushed appropriations in general are not something I'm comfortable with and not something I want to continue all the time. But I will do this tonight.
Any other discussion on suspension of rules? Or Mayor Shara, did you wish to respond?
I was just going to say that we can't control some of these things, and that is sort of the point of having these stabilization funds. There are things outside of our control that need to be dealt with, and that's why we have these reserve funds.
Can I respond?
You may.
I agree with you that that's the case, and that's in part why I'm asking you to be cautious generally, because I need to be able to tell the difference, and I need there to not be a track record of it always being an emergency and always rushed and always doing second reading. It really needs to be clear that there are exceptions and that it's not the rule.
We are extremely cautious, and the people who work for the city do a remarkable job in trying to anticipate issues that may happen. That's why we have the capital improvement program. These boilers, I think, are on the SIP for 2017. 2027. Last year they were working fine. So these things happen and we do our best. But the people who make these decisions and do this work do a truly remarkable job of trying to anticipate potential expenditures. And when you have as much infrastructure and buildings and capital as we have, things happen just like they happen in people's homes. Just multiply it by all of an entire municipality.
Any further discussion? Councillor Maori.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Director Weil, because that's very creative. You're doing a great job with the upcycling. You would have a very odd Etsy site, but that's great that you can use the parts. And I'm very impressed that you were able to put ground source heat pumps. I was wondering how and when that would come up. And that was a big question I had for you. It sounds like the savings with the boilers is just that's the efficiency issue is what we need to deal with now. But that's an interesting, but not actually surprising fact about learning and cooling. So I'm excited that it's not an either or proposition, that it just fits in with our strategic planning path, and we want to invest further in leads that we can use them as a backup. So thank you profusely. I think I'm very glad that there's a somewhat in-house solution.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Labarge and then Councillor Clemmer.
I want to thank you, Director Weil. Your presentation was excellent, excellent. And some of the things that Councillor Moulton had mentioned was things that are very, very important to me. But hearing why you felt that what should be done, to me, I felt that it was extremely important. And I think it's important also for our children going into an elementary school, that it is taken care of for those children to be able to learn in that school with a proper heating, ventilation right down the line. I also, if you look at this order, what are we saying here? It's saying we have one that's leaking. To me, that is critical, leaking. And I agree with Councilor Maori on what she was saying is the value here. We need to look at looking at the age of that boiler, which we heard tonight on the age of it. To me, that money is not a factor here. It's something that we need to replace. And we're going into two new boilers. And the other one now, they can't get the parts or anything. We're guaranteed here to be able to have operable equipment and safety equipment here. And I support this 100%. And thank you, Benjamin, very much for that whole description of what you went through.
Thank you, Councilor. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Councilor Clemmer.
Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Weil, for taking care of this so quickly. And was this just discovered during an inspection of the boilers preparing for the new school year? Or?
Yes, exactly. And as I mentioned, so Central Services and really Slava and Katie of Central Services have kind of pushed preventative maintenance. And we, like I mentioned, we discovered it with enough time to actually do something about it because they were so proactive on preventative maintenance and discovered this. And again, with steam, leaks become really a big problem. Like if it was a water boiler, we might be able to like leak by and you just collect the water. But steam, it gets really critical.
To collect steam and water.
I know.
But I mean, I just have one more point. You know, when things break, you know, one day they're working and then, you know, the next day they're not. So you can't predict these things. So I mean, that's why we do the inspections. It's why we have these emergency funds. And I think it's just really wonderful that we knew, you know, we found these other two boilers that we can use. And I'm sure Director Lascalia's guys there are thrilled to get parts that they can use and tinker with and create something. And I think it's just an all around great situation and that it'll be ready for school to start. And thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Thank you, Councilor Clemmer.
Any other discussion on suspension of rules so we may vote tonight? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
And Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Maori. Discussion on approval. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
And Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. That brings us next to 24.125, in order to increase public health nursing revolving fund limit from $100,000 to $275,000. And the title says pretty much the contents of the order. Would the mayor's office like to speak to this?
Director Nardi, I think, is going to speak to this. Yes.
Yes, thank you. So in doing a little bit of research for the next order, I found an article that an order that was approved by City Council in the June of 2022 that increased this threshold from its amount to 250,000. And that was because they started spending more money. I had never moved that amount over into my tracking sheet for my annual update of these, and therefore I left it at 100,000. I would like to increase it to 275 based on the amount of receipts that are coming in and going out of that fund.
And could you just briefly explain what that fund is used for?
Absolutely. So this fund is used for purchasing the vaccinations, the COVID vaccinations, other vaccinations for all of the clinics that are held. It is purchasing all of the equipment that is used. It is paying for sharps to take away the equipment that is used for those health clinics. Anything that has to do with the health clinic and public nursing.
Great, thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, Charlene, maybe you could answer this question. I thought with the vaccinations and so forth, that they usually get it by grants? The money?
So there are some grants that help pay for all of these, but this is for the revolving fund. So we're not moving any money. We're not using any of the city's money. All this does is allow them to spend. So what goes into the revolving fund is basically the reimbursements from insurance companies for that we received when somebody gets an inoculation and it gets charged to their insurance company. So per the revolving fund, the revenue generated is from the reimbursement from insurance companies for administration and cost of vaccines and fees associated with TB testing and patient management and other health risks. The allowable expenditures according to the revolving fund, you can expend money for the purchase of vaccines and other pharmaceuticals, medical and office equipment, professional development for nursing staff, contract staff, and associated education and outreach materials. So that's per the revolving fund that was approved. Again, this is just increasing the threshold from 100,000, which I just recently asked you to do, up to 275,000, which I think is more in line with the expenditures.
Thank you so much, Charlene.
So this is a financial order on first reading. We can either refer it to finance or refer it to the consent agenda of our next meeting.
I'll move that I'll move we refer to the consent agenda for the September 5th meeting.
Motion made by Councilor Moulton and seconded by Councilor Labarge to refer this to the consent agenda of our next meeting. Discussion on that referral. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Clemmer,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg,
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins,
Yes.
and Councilor Jarrett.
Yes. So that passes unanimously and will appear in the consent agenda of our September 5th meeting. Brings us next to our last financial order on first reading, 24.126, an order to establish revolving fund for charging station electricity. Ordered that the City Council hereby establishes a revolving fund under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E.5, for the deposit of proceeds from the use of electricity by the public at city-owned charging stations starting in fiscal year 2025, which began on July 1st, 2024, and to add this new revolving fund to Section 16-5 of the Code of Ordinances in accordance with the information below. A, the name of the revolving fund shall be charging station electricity, and B, the receipts credited to the fund will be generated from the fees associated with the public use of the electricity at the charging stations and shall be kept separate and apart from other city funds in the treasury. And C, the funds may be expended by central services and the climate action and project administration departments without further appropriation. And D, the funds may be expended for the purposes of paying for the electricity used at the charging stations and to maintain and extend the city's charging infrastructure. And E, the maximum amount to be expended in fiscal year 2025 is $200,000. So this is both a financial order and it's also an ordinance change because we're changing the section 16-5 of the Code of Ordinances. So, as a financial order, we have to decide, should it go to the consent agenda of our next meeting or refer to finance? As an ordinance, we must refer it to legislative matters, or we can choose to suspend the rule that requires that. So would the mayor's office or Director Weil like to speak to this?
Sure, I will certainly have Director Weil speak to it. But just as a quick sort of overview, so we had not been charging for electricity at our charging stations, and that is now at this point very unusual. We had done this as an incentive to try and encourage people to purchase electric vehicles and to use them. And at this point, most places do charge for this, and we want to expand our infrastructure. We're at a position where we now, many more people do have electric or electric hybrid, and we as a municipality have more, and we want to be able to expand our infrastructure for this. Director Weil had brought this recommendation to me, and I believe he's also worked with NESC, and that we start charging a sort of moderate rate for electricity. It's still a better bargain than gas, so we hope that is still something that incentivizes people, and that we can then use those funds. One, we will no longer be losing money on electricity, but then we can also use funds to help build out our EV infrastructure. So Ben, what did I miss, or what else?
This is again a situation where if the councilors would like more context, I can provide more, and I also don't want to waste anyone's time. I can say that when I first looked at this, I calculated that we were losing around $44,000 a year, or giving away electricity and the cost of maintaining the charger network at about that. In fact, because there are more EVs, I looked now for fiscal year 24, and our total cost was more like $61,445 per year. So it would be good to at least break even on that. If we want to add to the fact that we are going to need to expand the charger network, both for the public and for the municipal fleet, and I can report that we are going to be adding some DC fast chargers to the Roundhouse lot that will enable the existing municipal electric fleet to charge rapidly and kind of have normal type operations, but also increase the availability. And I think a big function is that these new fast chargers will draw visitors to Northampton downtown who might not otherwise come because they need to come and charge their cars traveling on 91 north-south. And that could add to significant business. And of course, that would increase our costs, and it's an opportunity to recoup the costs and make available a charger network for an increasing both municipal and public fleet.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. What would the fee be for these stations?
So what I calculated is that to break even right now, we need to charge $1.92 per hour. That comes out to about 33 cents per kilowatt hour. But one thing that I want to be able to do is recalculate this periodically. So for instance, this is using our current rate, but we actually negotiated, and the city will be purchasing electricity at a lower rate. And so when we have savings, we might be able to lower that rate, but we also want to be able to deal with the fact that what if rates increase? We also want to be able to adjust to that. But yeah, for now, it's and for a variety of reasons that I learned kind of exploring this, for level 2 chargers, the type of chargers that we already have around the city, typically people charge by the hour, and different cars will draw from those chargers at different rates, the different power rates, but generally they charge by the hour. And our $1.92 is lower than, but kind of in line with prices around here. So UMass, it's $279 an hour. Amherst Town Hall is $132 an hour. Deerfield's $198. In Springfield, $224. Springfield Garage, $3 an hour. So, you know, but of course, you're not shopping around when you're looking to charge your car. For the level 3 chargers, my expectation is that we follow roughly the market rate. It's a premium service, and level 3 chargers in this area have been around 50 or 55 cents per kilowatt hour. And in fact, you charge by kilowatt hour for DC fast chargers.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear our mayor come out and say that, and you also, we have lost around 40,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
It is, and it's actually larger. I said 40,000 before, but that was before, because there's so many more people charging. It's
Right.
actually like 61,500.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Councilor Clemmer.
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot at NESC. I think it's great. And another thing that this will achieve, if people, when they have an app and have their cars on these chargers, they won't be able to just leave their cars there overnight or for hours. The app will tell them when the car is charged, and then they'll start getting charged additional money after the car is charged if they just leave it sit there. So it'll, you know, create a turnover. So other people will come in, and they, you know, if they're passing through town, they won't just come in and not be able to charge the car because all the chargers are filled with people just parking there. So there's a lot of benefits to all of this. So I think it's really great, and another great discovery that you found that we were losing all this money, and it is just going to keep increasing because, you know, more and more people are getting cars, and also the benefit of bringing people in from downtown for the fast chargers. And, you know, the car will charge and they'll go get some coffee or do a little shopping. So it's definitely a win-win for Northampton.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One small correction. So because, Councilor Clemmer, you've been involved with NESC, you've seen the evolution of some of this thinking. Initially, I thought that we could charge a penalty for overstay with the system, and it turned out it was going to result in a very complicated ordinance change problem. And so the way it's going to work is actually that no enforcement will change. Parking enforcement will still write tickets for overstay. Your app will still tell you that you're done. But rather than get into some very complicated ordinance changes and enforcement problems for special cases like state vehicles and handicap hang tag vehicles, we're kind of leaving all enforcement exactly as it is.
Okay, thanks for correcting me.
Thank you. So how would the council like to proceed as far as referrals to committees or suspension of rules? Councilor Labarge.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to suspend the rule.
Which one?
Suspend the rule?
Which rule are you suspending? Around referring to legislative matters?
No. They're asking for 2 readings, correct?
No.
Oh, I thought it was for
No,
2 readings.
there aren't 2 readings asked for, but right now we have to refer to legislative matters as it's an ordinance change.
Yep.
And then we have to either refer to finance or to the consent agenda of our next meeting.
I would like to refer that to the consent agenda.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to refer this to the consent agenda. However, we will also need to refer this to legislative matters unless we suspend that rule. So, you know, we can certainly vote on one of those each at a time. But I would like to get a sense if there's an interest from the council to suspend the rule that requires us to refer this to legislative matters.
I'd move to suspend that rule.
I second that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's already a motion on the floor. So we can't, I don't think we can do two at once.
I'd move to, can I move to amend or offer an amendment to the motion to suspend the rules regarding both referrals?
Sure. So,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge and Counselor Clemmer, does that work for you to both refer this to legislative matters and suspend the rule requiring us to refer this to, no, I'm sorry, refer this to the consent agenda of our next meeting and suspend the rule that requires us to refer this to legislative matters?
Yeah, it's good for me.
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, so now we have a motion on the floor to both refer this to the consent agenda of our next meeting. That's part of the financial order part. And then to suspend the rules so we do not refer this to legislative matters. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Rothenberg,
Abstain.
Counselor Dobbs,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Counselor Clemmer.
Yes.
So that passes with 8 yes votes and 1 abstention, and that will appear in the consent agenda of our September 5th meeting. Thank you, Director Weil.
Thank you very much.
So now that brings us to orders. 24.108, in order to install temporary four-way stop at Hatfield Street and Cook Avenue. So this is in second reading. We discussed this on July 11th. Is there any new information or any further discussion on this this temporary order? Then I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve this temporary placement of four-way stop at Hatfield Street and Cook Avenue for a period of 120 days for evaluation.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Moulton and seconded by Counselor Labarge to approve. Discussion. Seeing none, a roll call please on approval of 24.108.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Rothenberg,
Abstain.
Counselor Dobbs,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Clemmer,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
That passes with 8 yes votes and 1 abstention. And I look forward to the results of that temporary study. Now we're down to ordinances. 24.106, an ordinance amending section 312-76 prohibiting parking on grassy areas. This received a positive recommendation from Legislative Matters on August 12th. And I'll just read the body of it. So no person shall drive or park a vehicle of any description, and then there's an addition that weighs in excess of 75 pounds, end of addition, upon the turf or grass covered area adjoining the paved or hardened portions of any street, and then an addition, or any public parking lot or public driveway. And I'm a member of Transportation and Parking, and my understanding is first, the original intent of this change was to address parking on grassy areas that are adjacent to public parking lots or public driveways, as that wasn't mentioned. The current ordinance only addresses streets. And then during that discussion, the question of parked bicycles or other lightweight vehicles was raised. So the language about vehicles under 75 pounds was added. is there any staff to speak to this? I guess we'll just take questions. Councilor Rothenberg.
I'm so sorry. This is just a note for Laura and President Jarrett procedurally. Can you correct the record? My intention was to make a yes vote on the last vote, and the abstention just flew out of my mouth like the routine because I had just made them. Sort of an autistic thing. Changing gears takes a lot of brain power.
I'm not sure that can be corrected without a reconsideration.
All right, it's fine. It
Okay,
passed.
thank you for stating that.
Like-
However, that statement could be put into the minutes. Anyone else speaking about 24.106 grassy areas, no parking? Councilor Labarge.
Yes, I was glad, at least I went to Legislative Matters to hear that. And seeing that apparently, I think you had added on the language because some people have questioned me about bicycles for children and, you know, even wheelchairs or whatever. So that is included, correct?
Right, as long as they weigh 75 pounds or less, that would then be allowed.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion on the floor?
No,
No,
not yet.
okay, or Councilor Rothenberg.
Just what's the procedural history? Who asked for this? Like, what did this arise from out of the community?
Yep, so this came from the Transportation and Parking Commission. So it originated there. I'm not sure beyond that why it was put forward. Probably the minutes of that meeting would have more, but I don't remember. Do you remember, Councilor Clemmer? It's also on TPC.
Yeah, I don't remember the history of it. I just know what you read today and stated.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there anyone from the mayor's office who has any information?
I wasn't at TPC, but I know that we have had issues with cars parking on grass, you know, in adjacent to other parking areas. So if like parking's filled, they'll just start parking on the grass. And but it was not enforceable because we didn't have an ordinance prohibiting that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second,
All right, motion made by Councilor Perry, and I didn't hear that, so but I hear the second from Councilor Labarge.
yep.
So now this is on the floor for approval. Any further questions? Councilor Rothenberg.
Yeah, just a comment before voting. I think this will be a no for Ward 3 because I'm not hearing anybody wanting more parking enforcement. I feel like people feel overly enforced in parking. So that's just my rationale for the record.
Councilor Elkins.
Isn't this less a lessening in enforcement? It is ensuring that for bikes or motorized, some smaller motorized things don't get wrapped into an already existing enforcement. I mean, I just put that out there. I interpret it as less enforcement, not more. But
Can you explain that more for me, Councilor Elkins?
Yeah, as I understand it, it is the ordinance, you know, vehicles are not, we don't allow vehicles to park in certain places. Some things are technically or legally defined as vehicles that could get swept into this prohibition, to the prohibition that already exists, that I think we agree it would be inappropriate because they're smaller vehicles like what motorized bikes. And Councilor Jarrett, you probably have a more exhaustive list than me, but so the point would be to make sure that there's not sort of enforcement or issues or neighbors calling the city about things that aren't generally. We didn't think that it was be covered by the ordinance. It's meant to keep cars from parking on their grass. It's not meant, and it was never interpreted to be meant to keep, a scooter, for instance, necessarily, of parking on the grass on the property. Fair to say? Did I characterize that right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's half of the change. The other half is about enforcement of grassy areas. And I mean, say that there's a very good reason that we don't allow enforcement on grassy areas. They can impact they can damage the turf, but they also can impact tree roots in a way that is harmful to trees. So, I've certainly seen cars that park on the grassy area over the curb, and that can damage tree roots. And on a street, we have that enforcement ability, but in a parking lot, we don't. And Mayor Shara, would you like to add?
You're right. And it's sometimes residents who complain about cars that are parked on grassy areas. And because unless you have it codified, you can't enforce that. But actually, I wanted to, and I'm going to credit Director Weil, who just brought this to my attention. He is concerned that the 75 pounds is too low a limit. And that, some wheelchairs are in excess of 75 pounds. So I would like us to amend this to 300 pounds.
Okay. Councilor Elkins?
I'm noting that Councilor Dobbs is nodding his head, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Councilor Dobbs.
Yeah, I would agree with that amendment. My wheelchair weighs about 300 pounds. My power wheelchair. Yeah. So
you think 300 is enough, or are there?
I think it's possible they could be a little more, because my wheelchair might not weigh as much as someone else's. Like, I don't know, maybe 400.
Right.
I guess I'm not an expert on that, but mine does weigh about 300. Yeah.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes, and also to considering on an individual who might be a heavy person, and that wheelchair is custom for them to be able to sit properly. And I think Jeremy Dubs will agree with that. And I have residents who have had measurements taken and having the chair done for them so that they can get in comfortably. And you're talking about difference in people's weight right down the line and their size.
Councilor Clemmer.
I think we can go 300 without a problem.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clemmer.
Yeah, so this is in public places, so I don't know if it affects, Ward 3's residents, but maybe instead of having a weight, maybe just have a wheelchair exemption or handicap vehicle exemption.
Could do that.
Not, obviously not a car with a handicap plate, but kind of would cover all the wheelchairs.
Right.
And motorized scooters too, and
Part of you also wanted to capture bicycles, right? So that's why it's not specific and was
the 75 pounds and then plus motorized scooters, have scooters and wheelchairs.
So just, I guess I want to make sure that we are getting, since this is a last minute change, I want to make sure we're getting really accurate information about what the appropriate weight limit is, and or whether wheelchair exemption could meet that.
Yes.
Is there anyone, Mayor, that you feel would be able to speak to this?
Director Weil, I don't know if Director Weil looked up a standard power wheelchair weight, and that's why he sort of raised this flag with me. So Ben, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or if you have some additional information you can share.
This is not my expertise. I'm sorry. This is not my expertise. I just I Googled it. There is the consideration, is parking leaving the vehicle? And does that change, like, if these kinds of vehicles are not left by the occupant because the occupant will need them in that type of a location, then it's not really all that important. So I mean, unfortunately, I'm thinking on the fly here.
Well, sorry. If I could
Councilor
just,
Dubs.
yeah, I was just there are sometimes scenarios where I would park my wheelchair somewhere and get out. Like even though I can't walk, like for example, I sometimes visit my friend and he has a few stairs that go up to his house, so I'll park my wheelchair outside of his house and then crawl up those stairs. So I mean, I guess just saying it does happen sometimes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yeah, why don't we just capture the thing we are excluding from parking there or prohibiting, which is just motor vehicles, rather than everything that could be there? Don't we have a legal, didn't we come across this on the bike trail language recently? And we were convinced that motor vehicle or like automobile or something means a specific thing. Can we just use that?
So, yeah, I'm not sure of the correct language. I would also unless there's an urgency to have this go into effect, we can wait 3 weeks and we can have, we can do more research to determine what the best language would be and bring this back on September 5th. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, could I suggest possibly talking with Keith Benoit? He should be able to get those answers very well. If not through Stravos, they're excellent too. Both of them would be very helpful with language.
All right, then I will take back my motion to approve.
Do we have consent to remove the motion on the floor?
Yep.
Okay. So is there interest in a motion to postpone to our September 5th meeting?
I'll make a motion to postpone it.
Second it.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Dubs, seconded by Councilor Labarge to postpone 24.106 to our September 5th meeting. Is there discussion on postponement? Yeah, just say who is going to take on doing this? Is the mayor's office? Will you be coming with a recommended language change?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more hands, roll call please on postponement.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dubs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Clemmer,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
and Councilor Maori.
Yes.
That passes unanimously and will be on our September 5th meeting agenda. We have one more ordinance, 24.107, an ordinance relative to stop signs in the vicinity of Smith College. This was also generated by Transportation and Parking, and it received a positive recommendation from Legislative Matters on August 12th. And Laura, would you be able to bring up the aerial image document?
Sure.
Yeah. So this codifies, there's one stop sign that is already in place that is not in the code. And then with the other ones, they're all T intersections and they all meet the warrants for having a stop sign at the T intersection, whether that's traffic counts, visibility, and these are all in the area of Elm Street and West Street, which is an area that we been focusing on for safety improvements. So this is part of those safety improvements. Great, thank you, Laura. So questions or motions?
I would
Or
move to approve.
motions? Okay. Motion made by Counselor Perry
Second.
and seconded by Maori. Is that right? Yes, Counselor Maori. So it's on the floor for approval. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call please on approval of 24.107.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Rothenberg,
Yes.
Counselor Dobbs,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Clemmer,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, that passes unanimously. We have one more item on our agenda. How's everyone doing? Does anyone need a break before we get to that discussion item?
You can use 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes it is. Come back at 9:28. Okay, welcome back, Northampton City Council. Our last item on the agenda tonight is a discussion of a request from school committee to form a 4 to 6 person collaborative work group between the school committee and the city council to discuss and make recommendations for actions to address future budget shortfalls. So this request asks that the work group be made up of 2 to 3 members each of the school committee and the city council and chosen by each body as a whole. So I placed this on the agenda as a discussion to hear from the council with the thought that I or another member of the council could put a vote to establish on a future agenda if we decide to move forward. The mayor was asked to convey this to the council. So Mayor, would you like to speak?
Sure. So, I mean, what you have on there is exactly the motion that was voted by the school committee. And then the request was made of me to give this to you to have your own discussion about it.
Great, thank you. So some of the questions that I have, I mean, there's the question of both, you know, should we do we think this is appropriate, but also the format. So this format versus, for example, having joint committee meetings, the term, how long would this extend for, staffing concerns. You know, our administrative assistant doesn't have the capacity to staff this. Last, you know, and from talking with Laura about that, and then the procedure for choosing, you know, would we have some sort of election? So just throwing those out there as things to consider. So would love to hear from the council. Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes, I just wanted to read into the record what Member LaBounty said about this at the school committee meeting, and then I'll just briefly share what my thoughts on it. So she had it in parts. One was the reason why she wanted it, and the second was sort of what kinds of people she was envisioning having on it. She said, I felt like we really needed to do some work together that would perhaps think of things in a different way. The reason I say this is I think we come into the budget with kind of a set idea. And I'm hoping that by collaborating, having a smaller group collaborating, we can take the armor down a little bit. Because when we have some of these conversations around the budget, people come in very armored up. And that's not when you do your best thinking about when and how to go about what's creative and what to do. She goes on to say, I'm not talking about dismantling the city's budget or doing nothing. Somewhere between those two. I'm really just looking for something about how we approach what we are doing now and whether there are resources outside of the city that we are not even thinking about. I'm hoping that this short-term working group could make suggestions about a path, like what things should the city be doing that might be different, rather than saying, this is just the way it is. The motion is really just to ask for the creation of the group so that we can get perhaps a little more creative about what we're doing, rather than finding ourselves in the exact same spot 6 months from now. So that was my hope. And then part 2. I do have some thoughts about membership. At first, originally, I thought maybe it could be the budget committee and the finance committee. But then my concern was that those groups have set ideas about how things should be done. I wanted a little bit more of a beginner's mind of what's possible, not just, you have to do this, we can't do that, and there's no in between. Some of the skill set that I would hope people would have would be the ability to take in another's view, maybe change your mind, and to come forward with an open-mindedness, and people who do their homework. So I think it presents a challenge to us because I think that we haven't seen a lot of interest from council in doing that. She thinks that this committee should be sort of each council and school committee pick the members, the 2 to 3 members that they're going to send. And to me, that means a majority vote is going to decide who goes. And I don't see that kind of interest here that we would pick 2 to 3 people who are really thinking outside the box, because I haven't seen dialogue and engagement with new ideas. So I worry that this beautiful vision and hope can't actually be executed this way. I think that if Member LaBounty really wanted to explore this, probably the best way to do it would be to caucus privately with people that she thinks have those abilities, and then perhaps have those members bring forward resolutions or special meetings or plans. I didn't think about the things you raised, President Jarrett, about the administrative, assistant and the staffing and all of that. But those were my concerns about sort of couching this formally. I think that we really run a risk of just having a smaller group that perpetuates the same ideas that the larger group does, because the larger group is choosing who goes to the smaller group. So those are my concerns, but I love the gesture and spirit of this. And I hope that we all are finding, in whatever ways we can, different ways to work on this. I will just say in closing, I made a brief public statement to the school committee at their last meeting. And I said, representative to representative, our jobs are very difficult, and we have to go home and ask ourselves hard questions. And I'm no exception to that. But we ask ourselves different questions, like the questions that I ask myself is not, what does Ward 3 think of me? Or did I do the right thing? I sleep well at night on those things because I feel that I do a very good job staying in touch with my constituents and bringing forward their ideas. What I worry about, for me, the hard question for me is, what bridges am I building, right? Because there are these heightened tensions and we do get armored up, like Member LaBounty is talking about. And it can feel like, rather than being diplomatic and working together, bridges are just being blown up because we're in so much tension here. But what I wanted the representatives of school committee to think about, and what I would like the members here to think about as well, in the spirit of Member LaBounty's idea, but also in the spirit of what I said to the school committee the other night, there is a bridge that we can build together. And it may not be the bridge from me to you interpersonally. It may not feel comfortable to debate and argue with me. I understand that on a human level. But a bridge that we can build, all of us together, is from all of the people of Northampton to their government, to the institution, to the representatives. And what I had said to the school committee is that when you look at our charter, the people of Northampton are at the top of it. They are the city. The representatives have the power of those people vested in them. The charter doesn't say the people of Northampton are incompetent and cannot make decisions for themselves, and therefore we have representatives, right? This is like an efficiency system that we are all supposed to come in here and bring the voices of those people and build that bridge that gets them to their resources and to their representation. So I join with Member LaBounty in wanting us to have more creative ideas. I think the more that we do that kind of constituent work, the more of those creative ideas we will naturally bring to the table, because the people of Northampton have creative ideas and they don't think the same way as our decisions have reflected, right? They have different ideas. So that's all I would say to you tonight on this motion. I love this idea. I'm cautious and skeptical and concerned about what it would actually look like if we formed this, but I'd be open to further discussion about how we might do it so that we could realize Member LaBounty's idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors. Councilor Elkins.
I saw Member LaBounty's remarks myself. I've also have spoken with Member LaBounty in the past. I would say that back when we were discussing the opt-in provision, I did say that I was interested in talking more about that, and I feel like that discussion could be part of what Member LaBounty was thinking and discussing. And I said then that I was, happy to lead or to see that conversation go on. I think there's many more things to talk about as well. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it could be, I think it could be helpful. There's been a lot of folks talking around each other and each body's functions and core responsibilities and prerogatives, and so there's been, you know, some amount of us, you know, we want school committee to do this, and school committee suggests, you know, we want council to do this. And so I do think there could be some benefit. I do have, I mean, I do also have some questions about how it would be structured. And also whether or not there might be any open meeting law, well, or just the interaction between, like, if there were a certain number of finance committee members versus or something like that. And I don't know the answer to that, but I think Counselor, I mean, Member LaBounty is commended. I commend her for suggesting that we, you know, continue the conversation, and not in private and caucuses and amongst ourselves, but in under circumstances where we are actually talking directly to one another. I think that's not a bad idea. I'm not sure how we make what that looks like, but I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, this is for Councilor Elkins. Aren't you on the other committee with Sam Hopper, you and whoever on that, whatever you're doing for 5-year plan or something?
The Northampton, the school strategic planning group.
Yes.
I am on that. I can say that we completed our work, and so I don't think there are any more meetings of that scheduled. Oh, I mean, I think there's going to be ongoing community discussion, and there's discussion about how, you know, when and how that's going to take place, and those of us who did that work, and it was many hours of meetings and discussions. It was frankly some of the most I will share for those of us, because there's been many folks who've just questioned that whole process and the legitimacy of it, and what we were doing there. But I would say that it was some of the most meaningful work, and working with people from across the city of different viewpoints and different expertise to think very deeply about, you know, where our schools are going. And so I value that experience very much. And I think that, you know, we're giving the community back some really important things to talk about and think about, and sort of what's next. And that's part of maybe what Member LaBounty you know, is part of what's on the horizon, I think, for our community discussions. So yeah, but I don't know that that's necessarily related. There are going to, I think, be some.
It is related to me, because
no, I mean, it is. There are actually some things coming out of that talk about the sort of our budget and and how we talk about that, and how we meet our what we want for our kids in the schools within the reality of our budget constraints.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Dubs. You're muted. Oh,
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to echo my fellow counselors in saying that I also love this idea. I was a proponent of opting in a few months back for because I believed, you know, that we should have more collaboration and more open minds about, you know, during the budget process. And so I guess just in the spirit of Member LaBounty's motion of wanting to have someone with an open mind and with this, in the spirit of collaboration, I just wanted to throw it out there that that I'd be willing to be on that work group. I know that we haven't talked about the process yet, and like how we're going to go about deciding who would be on it, but just kind of wanted to throw it out there that I'd be willing to do that, and and I like the idea too. So yeah, thank you.
I think you'd be great.
Thank you. Other counselors? Counselor Perry.
Yeah. Again, I would just say that I truly believe that every member of school committee, city council, we care about our city. We're here because of how much we love our city, and open collaboration is part of, I believe, our jobs. So I love the idea behind it. I too have questions about how we would form it, and perhaps maybe instead of having a specific committee, we look at maybe a method of having one or two collaborative meetings for us during that budget season. We all come together for the presentation of the budget. Perhaps we could figure out a way to schedule that, because I kind of agree with Councilor Rothenberg, is that, how do we pick the folks who would represent us? One of the things I love about being a counselor is that we all bring a different perspective. We all have things that we are passionate and we care about, and we all have ideas. So perhaps what we could do is try and figure out a way to, obviously someone's going to have to do more work, but maybe find a way for us all to come together one or two more times just to have some of these discussions, possibly follow up on that. So.
Does anyone else like to speak before I go back to Councilor Labarge? Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I was actually quite moved by this proposal from member LaBounty. I tend to appreciate her, not just because she's from Ward 7, but she's makes very thoughtful and reflective comments and suggestions. And so I too, I really appreciate that, and wondering about, I talked to Councilor Moulton about finance doing precisely what member LaBounty had said about meeting with budget and properties from the school committee. And I don't think it's either or. At first I was like, because I'd like to fully utilize the structures that are there for the practical issues of open meeting law and admin support, and not overstretching folks. So I'm wary of that part of it, but I think it's very thoughtful. Generally on council, we have the president appoint people to committees. We'd have to really think about it. We don't want to add any more harm at this point. So we'd have to think about a process that didn't feel harmful if we were going to choose folks. So that's something I'm thinking about. But yeah, I think, so I don't think it's either or. I do plan on finance to find a way to reflect. I've longed to also meet with school committee. We kind of see them at that first meeting. I'm with you, Councilor Perry. I think we all are kind of invested in this. And that's another issue too, is I think we all are. So how do we choose? So we'll have to give some thought to that, but I'm not against it at all. I think we have to, what I appreciate about it is I really think we have to do something. I think none of us want to repeat on a personal or political level of last fall. It was hard on everyone. So I think that's why she put it out there. And I think it was very courageous. And I think we should maybe percolate and think about the structure part of it. And I will also go ahead on finance, and also work with my finance committee, and hopefully budget and properties to have, maybe a couple of collaborations there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moulton.
So I think one of the common themes that we've all mentioned tonight is communication and collaboration, and finding ways to include collaboration with our counterparts on the school committee, and to do it in a way that's not in private caucuses, but may combine a number of ideas that have been put forward tonight. It may include a couple more joint meetings. It may include some kind of a standing work group that that is is a formal way of bringing and I agree with the sentiments that were expressed by Member LaBounty about seeking people thinking outside the box. I think we all can think outside the box and be creative. So I'm supportive of the idea, and I think we need to think about how inclusive we can be in carrying it out.
Thanks. Anyone else who hasn't spoken before I go back to Councilor Labarge?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. I have to say, I agree with Councilor Perry. I've really thought about this, being creative and all that. We look back, I think quarterly, way back, have mentioned about the budget, the beginning of the budget, starting earlier. I've been thinking about that too. But I also have to agree with Councilor Perry of having joint meetings. I think that's really great to have all of us together on a joint meeting. Total communication, working together, all of us. To me, that is important here. When you're going to go ahead and say, well, we'll go ahead and vote on this counselor or that counselor, whatever. Finance committee is crucial, which we're part of finance committee. No matter what, even if you're not on finance, you have to vote on the orders of finance. So to me, I would like us to see doing really joint meetings. I think that's an excellent way to go. We're all together, just like we do after we're elected. Our first meeting is with the mayor with the budget hearing. And we could do it like that, of having joint meetings together and invite who we would like to bring in to speak. And I think the public is very important also. We need to be very creative with this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, been a lot of great ideas thrown out here. I'm interested in all of them. I do think that if we go with the smaller group as one of them, that we want to make sure there's a diversity of ideas in that representation. So that's something that I would want to commit to. No, there are alternative structures like a majority and a minority pick, for example, that could possibly be used to choose. This is outside of our standard select committee process, which is typically, a select committee process that's established under our rules. The councilors bring a resolution to establish a select committee. If that passes, the council president chooses who is on it. And so that's in our rules. What we're considering here would be outside of that, which is, I believe, acceptable. Anybody can create a subcommittee, but we'd have to define it clearly and staff it. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, and I have to agree with you, our council president, with our secretary of our council. She is so overwhelmed with so many minutes and so forth. I was glad to hear you say that tonight about our secretary for city council. That would be a huge amount of work for her. And I think what she has done for us city councilors, she has gone beyond her role as a city councilor clerk for us. So I'm glad to hear about Laura in general of not being included on a special committee like that, which, whoever is picked from school department or the school committee, and also city councilors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Shara.
I just wanted to just share. So the school committee actually didn't discuss sort of these more practical logistics around this. So I just wanted to let you know that. I fully appreciate that Laura has a very, very full plate. The school committee clerk is actually only a part-time position, so I don't know if there is space in her schedule as well. She clerks for the school committee and all of the subcommittees that they have as well. So we would have to explore whether there's enough in her hours to be able to take this on as well.
And would there be a possibility, would there need to be otherwise an appropriation order that would potentially fund staffing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's no budget that's been established to cover this.
Right.
And whose budget would it come out of?
Right. Well, it's right. Would we have any in our city council budget? But I mean, that's something we could look at. But we still have to find the person.
Correct. I mean, there's always the option that the body staffs themselves too, right? That you rotate through people to take minutes, or
all right.
There's always that option that is used by at least one commission. And with, the technology we have now and transcripts, it's a bit easier than it used to be.
Thank you. So, as I said, I put this forward as a discussion. We heard a lot of good ideas here. Not a clear consensus as far as I'm hearing. So we could have further discussion. Counselors could bring a proposal to a future meeting. And then we can discuss that proposal or amend it. So there's a bunch of different ways we can move forward. Counselor Mary.
Yeah, I wonder about kind of inviting Member LaBounty or any of the school committee members who are interested to kind of come and discuss what we've been discussing. Go over our questions, and I'd like to understand more their vision.
Right. So we could invite to a future council meeting or committee meeting a limited number of school committee members. They couldn't be a quorum of school committee or a quorum of any of their committees.
Right.
Yep. I like that.
Is that something the finance committee would be interested in hosting?
Yeah, we can host it. What'd you say? No, like Council LaBarge had something to say.
I was coughing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. I was just kind of going over what committee would feel, kind of appropriate to take it on. I mean, every committee has some investment in it, but yeah, I was planning to reach out. I mean, Member LaBounty happens to be on budget and property, so I was, Councilor Moulton and I were talking about having some sort of, inviting them and having some sort of collaboration or discussion anyway. So I think I would have to maybe bring it up in our next finance meeting with the members to see how they felt.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Okay.
So any further discussion on our path forward, and then, the individual counselors can decide to take the lead in some way, or we can have further discussion at finance or further discussion at a future council meeting.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I'd be happy to, I was frankly going to invite school, Member LaBounty and or some amount of members anyway. I'm torn because I think if we're going to have members from all of council and not finance, then it might be better to bring them to a full council meeting. But we can discuss. I don't have a strong opinion, but I'm just kind of thinking about it. But yes, if the council feels that the finance is a good place to start, we can do that as well.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Elkins.
I guess I worry a little bit about so if there is a sort of outcome to this that is, something that we do, of course, that must be like the goal and legal requirement is that that's open and that's something we, that is designed for, for the public to see and participate in or understand, how it's working. I do think there's some room for some private discussions though about some ideas. Because I don't know, I feel a little that Carrie had a member LaBounty, has this idea and she's brought it forward and that's great. And then but then I don't know, it feels like it's a lot to ask her to produce the plan or to, you know what I mean, or put her on the spot so I don't know. Obviously there's, room for discussions to be happening between us and our colleagues. And as we think about, maybe it comes back for finance to formalize a plan, we'll get a better idea of what our colleagues and school committee might be thinking about what it might look like. Anyway, that was just some musing about procedurally, like how we come up with if we're going to do anything with what the plan is, or what proposals might be proposed. It's getting late. Sorry.
Yeah, well, any counselor is welcome to approach member LaBounty, and there's no open meeting law between our bodies because we're independent bodies. Further input in this discussion? Okay. Look forward to seeing how this moves forward. So that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Maori and seconded by Councilor Perry to adjourn. And there's no discussion on, so roll call, please.
Councilor Rothenberg,
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Clemmer,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
and Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you all. We had some good discussions tonight and made some good decisions. So we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.